Is it running? Snap. Oh, let me switch it. Hello, family. Welcome to episode number, drum roll, six. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Think with Armel, episode number 6. If you're here for the first time, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know what you think in the comments. I always like reading and getting some feedback on the conversations we're having. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Today we're talking to Jim Marshall. He is a writer. He wears many hats, and as you will discover as you listen to our conversation. So the subject we're discussing today is Septemics. I know this is probably new to you. It's new to me too. Never heard about this up until I stumbled across his book. I thought it was very interesting. So it's kind of a novel type of, I want to say, psychological framework, so to speak. And I'm gonna play a short voice note on his web. By the way, this is the website. It's called septemics.com. Go ahead and hop on here, and the link to this website is gonna be in the description below. So go ahead, like, share, and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comment section, okay? So let me go ahead and introduce you to Jim Marshall. I'm gonna let him speak for himself for a little bit, and then I'm gonna come back behind that with some comments. Take a listen to this.
Hello, my name is Jim Marshall. I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I developed a revolutionary practical philosophic system and published it in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. This is a textbook on a new subject called Septemics. Many years of direct observation has shown that this book would dramatically improve the life of anyone who takes advantage of it. As to my qualifications, I am a polymathic intellectual whose areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, metaphysics, military science, political science, physical culture, education, organization, and music. And
I know that was a whole lot, but he's for real. Okay, he has to lay it out so you know.
I hold a Bachelor of Science cum laude from City University of New York. Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related.
So, Septemics is very new. I've never heard about this before, but there is some logic to it. It's very, I want to say it is very organic. That's how I describe it. So it's not something that kind of emanates from some theory. It's the opposite. It came from literal observations. So the guy wasn't intending to create Septemics, it just kind of jumped out at him, so to speak. That's kind of my understanding at this point. And I thought it was very interesting. It was an interesting conversation. I'm still in the middle of reading the book. Very interesting, very interesting pieces of information that you find in here. The one thing that I wanted to call out before I go ahead and, get you into the conversation with Jim, I wanted to, by way of example, because that really works for me, right? When you're trying to explain something to me, there's no concrete example, it's very hard. Most of us are visual learners. That includes me. So this is an example of what a septemic scale is. So a scale, septemics, emanates from 7. That's the digit. And in his book, he talked about the number 7, have 7 days of the week. The world was created in 7 days. It looks like there's something about the number 7 that just, for some reason, that just keeps recurring in nature, in history, everywhere, the number 7. And some way, somehow, his observations landed him around number 7 as well. You can argue about that, whether or not that is really correct. I don't know. I'm just sharing the information as I, learn it here. Now, based on what I understand, this is the scale of basic purpose, right? So this scale allows you to judge, say, your character, so to speak. Where do you fall? And I'm gonna use very a good a good couple of examples to paint a picture of what this is. So as you can see, this scale goes from saint all the way to subversive, meaning that you're like a bad person. And so if you take a character like Mother Teresa, most of us will agree that Mother Teresa will be way up this list, right? So she'll be closer to what you would describe as a saint, right? And then if you think of a character like Genghis Khan, the guy that killed then I don't know how many people the Genghis Khan killed. A lot. I don't remember the numbers, but I read the book. So, anyways, so Genghis Khan will be towards the bottom of this list. And so with this scale, you're actually able to look at a character and then assess where that character is on the scale. And that informs you, that lets you know what kind of person you're dealing with, right? So somebody like me, I obviously know that I'm not gonna be number one or number seven. I'm gonna be somewhere in the middle, maybe like I don't know, like a four or maybe a five. That's kind of where I think I am. I don't know. You can self-assess as well. Anyways, I hope this kind of paints a picture of what those skills are, and there are 35 of these. This is just one of them. And the idea, I guess, is to be able to assess people, assess groups of people, and you can think about places you can apply knowledge like this in business, in politics, in family relationships. It basically applies to anywhere you have humans, right? Now, how correct is this? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I just thought this is an interesting piece of information that maybe more people need to know about and take a look at. Maybe tell us if we got something good here, or maybe we don't. So the only way to find out is to have more eyes on this, and then maybe we could flush out what is true versus what is not, right? So thank you all for joining. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. That way, every time I drop a new episode, you're going to be the first to know. I appreciate you guys hopping on this one with me. This is Jim Marshall with Septemics on Think with Armel, episode number 6.
That were doing interesting things or that I felt that I felt like their mind was an interesting place to explore. And that's really the reason I is this is kind of a passion project, but I do think that nowadays long form conversations are really needed. I'm one of those guys that kind of got burnt out on the, snippets, the short form conversations that really didn't bring you much. You really don't understand a subject unless you take the time to sit down, to deep dive it, and to talk to either read the books or talk to people that would be expert or that would know better based on either what they do on a day-to-day basis or just based on their experience around the specific subject. So that's really the intention here. I just really want to get to know you as a person, get your origin story, tell us why you do what you do, how you do it, and why you think is important, basically. So that's a little bit of background about me. Why don't you go ahead and do a quick intro yourself?
Okay. Well, I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and
September.
published it in the book Septemics Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
Interesting. So how do
Uh,
you how do you define the is it do you call it a framework of philosophical framework or is it more of like uh how do I call it a process that people can implement? How do you box that out?
Septemics is a philosophical science
Okay.
based on the fact that many phenomena related to human beings occur in a sequence of 7 levels.
Wow.
Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7.
Yeah.
Septemics comprise a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps.
Wow.
There
Okay.
are 35 such scales, each of which is unique And together they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty, etc., that any person has can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
Usually more than one. Okay, that's very interesting. Can you give us a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, your origin story, and kind of lead us as to how you got to where you are today? Like,
Okay.
who's Jim?
Okay, well, the story of Septemics really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16.
Okay.
Now, I thought at that time, of course, that I was going to be engineering physical things, such as airfoils, electrons, motors.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because that is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people do not understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the husband, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand somebody running for office, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this book solves that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, 35 axes.
Okay.
So, to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, working one on one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively many thousands of hours. Now, all of my clients benefited as a result of our interaction,
Mm-hmm.
but I started to notice fairly early on that I could predict the outcome of the session. Now, I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And that as a result of our interaction, the client would go to the next level up on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times. And each time it did, it verified my hypothesis, which is the essence of the scientific method.
Okay. Yeah.
So now I just kept making notes. By 1995, a couple of things happened. One is that by then I had about 32 scales of varying lengths that I had simply observed in the session. Now, of course, once I observed it in the session, I would go outside the session in the real world and I would see it right in front of my face without my ever telling anybody about this. It's right there.
Crazy.
So then, I had one scale in particular that had 6 levels that by then I absolutely knew was correct because I had been using it successfully on a daily basis for decades. Well, one day I was pondering a difficult client, and I realized that this client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. Now, it was obvious to me when I saw what the level was where to insert it. And when I inserted that seventh level into the 6 level scale, the scale manifested mathematically, which is to say, all kinds of data jumped out at me. Now, the whole point of math is you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared. There's no secret. Anybody who knows math and physics can follow the exact logic, the exact sequence of steps that he took to get to E equals mc squared. Now, so that's what was happening here. In other words, when you have data jump out like that, it means there's mathematics embedded in it, as with the Fibonacci sequence. So I realized, whoa, I found something here. I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, it has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it. Now you have to realize I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So I think in math. It's a very real thing to me. It's not just something that's on a piece of paper you do in a classroom. I see it everywhere. So that's why I was able to recognize this. So then I thought, well, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So, knowing what I was looking for, I inspected these scales. And in a short period of time, each scale went to 7 levels. And as it did, it manifested mathematically. So, in
Okay.
a short period of time, I had 32 7-level scales, each of which was unique, but they all had mathematics embedded in them. And I said, wait a minute, this looks like a new subject to me. So then I realized I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to
Mhm.
helping people by the millions if I put this data in a book and get it out so that people can use it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was finished in December of 95, and I sent it to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They had different responses, but distinctly positive responses. And that told me that this was exactly what I thought it was, which is a subject that people would resonate with, that could really help people to make their lives better. So I spent the next 25 years working on this book. Because you have to realize first I had to discover the phenomena. And I kind of already told you how that happened
Mhm.
in the sessions, although I did find 3 more scales while I was writing the book. Then I had to take this data and use it to create a workable philosophic system. That took 20 years. Now you have to realize, as an engineer, I'm only interested in results and facts. Okay? My clients were happy with me because I got results all the time.
Mhm.
That is what engineering is about. Okay? So,
So could
two
you
engine. No, go ahead.
could you by way of example describe to us what a session looks like, or what a typical client profile could be, and then could you also by way of example describe what a typical scale will be and what this seven scale actually is?
Okay. Well, first of all, there's 3 different questions there.
Yes.
So let me see if I remember them all. Uh, uh, Basically, as far as the sessions that I did that led me to discover this, I essentially used Socratic dialogue aided by biofeedback. Now, if you read the Socratic dialogues, of which there are many written by Plato, Socrates' student,
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea is that Socrates would coax a realization out of the person he was talking to. In other words, he didn't tell them anything. He just said, he asked the right question. Okay. Now, when you add biofeedback to that, it becomes very powerful because you may already know that every time you think a thought, the electromagnetic field around your body changes. And this can easily be measured by an ohm meter. The resistance in your body changes every time you think a thought. Moreover, different categories of thoughts have different manifestations. So if the person is upset with his mother, the meter will say one thing. If he's worried, it will read a different thing. If he's angry, it will read a different way. So not only can I get an indication that mother is the item for him, but really what it is. So then I could ask the right question. You see? So that answers the first part of it.
Right.
Now, okay. So now, let me tell you now, in a general way, because this will help your listeners, how this is beneficial, how Septemics is beneficial to people, okay? Without going into specifics. I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up the scale, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I am giving you a yardstick by which to assess human affairs, which is an entirely new concept.
Yeah, it's completely new. It's not something that I've seen or heard of before. Yeah.
Right. So this is very specific. There's nothing vague about this. You got to realize I have the mind of an engineer. Okay. Now, more importantly, once you find out what level you or another person is at on any scale, that by itself is enlightening and beneficial. Every time you find a correct level, you say, oh, now I understand what's going on between me and Joe. Or now I understand why my parents can't get along, or something like that. This is one of the ways that you know you found the correct level. If a person says, well, I think it's level 3, and he has no realization, it's not level 3. It's another level.
Okay.
So just spotting the level, you have insight. Okay. So you're already smarter on that subject.
So do
And
people
then, and then let me finish. And finally, once you know the correct level of a person, you can improve that person by moving him up one level at a time. This is a big advance for human society because I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, dilemmas, situations, and difficulties, and so forth that they can't resolve. And the reason is always because they don't know the gradient. They don't know the proper gradient. In other words, every good therapist, facilitator, teacher, counselor in the world understands that human development must be done on a gradient. You can't take a couch potato and make him an Olympic athlete. There are too many intervening steps. Okay? So these scales are the gradients. So, in other words, take a subject, there are 35 subjects, but let's take, for example, the scale of basic purposes. Okay? Every human being has one of 7 basic purposes. That is a fantastic advance. You're not choosing from amongst a million, you're choosing from amongst 7, and all the others are subsets of those. Now,
so could you tell us what are the 7 basic purposes?
well, I could go into the scale of basic purposes, and in fact, it's on my website if you want to look at it. But I want to finish explaining how the subject in general is useful to you without getting into, because you have to realize each scale is unique. You cannot infer anything about scale A by studying scale B. That's good news because as a result of them each being unique, it spans the spectrum of human experience. In other words, this is universally applicable. So if you can read English reasonably well, and you want to improve yourself or others, this book is for you.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's a fair characterization.
Yeah. So let me just say one sentence here to kind of bring this into focus. The data in this book are vital for every human being and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
And so I guess so each of these scale addresses a specific area of the human experience. Like for example, you have the scale of basic needs. I'm assuming you have different scales. And I see
Yes.
why you say one scale doesn't necessarily like play into or interact with another. They are all very independent things that you need to like understand
Yes.
on their own grounds, right?
Right. If I may, I'd like to tell you the names of the 35 scales, and then you will know exactly what subject matter is covered in this book. It
Sure,
only
go
takes a
ahead.
minute. Okay, so
Yeah, go ahead.
there are 24 scales which apply primarily to the individual.
Okay.
These are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the user. Now, I further want to explain some of these are general scales and some of these are specific scales. So in a general scale, once you find a level for a person, you're done. In other words, for example, on the scale of basic purposes, when you find your basic purpose, you have an epiphany, that's it. You're through with that. Now you can try to move up to the next level, but you can't use it further for yourself. You could use it on somebody else. As opposed to in a specific scale is context driven, meaning it has to have a context to make sense. So for example, the scale of motivation. You could ask, what is my motivation toward my mother? What is my motivation toward my father? What is my motivation toward my uncle? What is my motivation toward my grandfather? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you could use it in hundreds of ways. Then you could put it on the reverse vector and say, what is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my girlfriend's motivation toward me? What is my next door neighbor's motivation toward me? And use it hundreds of ways there. So you see, because it's context driven, there are hundreds of ways that you can apply that scale. See, and most of the scales are specific. So okay, this is very, very broad.
It is broad, and it's a lot. That's why I want to try to help make sense to it to my first, starting with me, and then obviously the audience. Maybe we should look at I like using examples, right? So one of the skills you called many that kind of struck a nerve. I was like, oh, I want to know about that. But one that would be like I don't want to say necessarily a popular scale in my view, but something that most people will be able to relate to would be something like the scale of communication. Can you break that down? What is the scale of communication, and how can one kind of self-assess where they are on that scale?
Okay, so first of all, let me say this. I think what would help your viewers to understand this is for me to give you an example of how to use this on somebody. And in doing so, I'll talk about specific scales. Okay? So let's say your brother is complaining to you about a romance problem he has, right? I don't even know if you have a brother. But if you have a brother and he comes to you and he says, Armel, my girlfriend's driving me crazy. She got drunk. We had a fight. She goes out with other guys. I don't know what I'm going to do. Blah, 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 right? Very common situation. So you want to help him because he's your brother, right?
Yes.
So you say, Joe, come over here. Let me show you this. And you open the book to the scale of relationships. And you put it in front of him. Now he's going to look at it and he's going to say something like, you mean there's a scale of relationships? I never heard of such a thing. And you say, yes, this relationship that you have been complaining to me about for a year now, where is it on this scale? He's going to want to know that because he's having trouble and you're opening a door for him. So he's going to look at it with interest, see? And what's going to happen is in a matter of seconds, he will find a bracket, meaning he'll say something like this. Well, I can see that levels 1, 2, or 3 don't apply to us because we're having a lot of trouble. And those are at the top of the scale. So it has to be 4, 5, 6, or 7. And you say, okay, very good. Let's have you read the text, and then you can get it exactly. And he's going to want to do that because he's already starting to see some light in here, see? Yeah. So he reads it, and you can help him as a tutor. And he reads it, and then it comes back, and you say, okay, now that you read it, where is this relation? And he's going to look at it and say, well, now that I read it, I can see our relationship is at level 5. That's not so good. That's near the bottom. No wonder we're having a lot of trouble. See? And
Is a level 7 better than a level 2?
no, the top of the scale is level 1, and the bottom is 7.
Oh, so 1 is at the top, not at the bottom. Okay.
That's right.
So so level 1 is good, level 7 is bad.
Right.
Okay.
So I see. So he just had an epiphany about his relationship. He sees that it's at level 5 on this scale. Then you say to him, all right, now let me show you something else. And you open up the book to the scale of sexuality. So he looks at it and he's going to go through a similar process. He's going to say, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? You say,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
literally what I just said to myself.
yeah. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on this scale?
Yeah.
He's going to want to know that because he's having trouble, you see? So he
Wow.
looks at it. He's going to find a bracket. He's going to say something like, well, I can see right off that 6 and 7 have nothing to do with me. It's completely out of my realm. And 1 or 2, I don't even really understand. So it's got to be 3, 4, or 5. So you see, he got it down to 3. So you say, okay, now let's have you read the text, and then you can get it exactly. So he reads the text. You can help him as a tutor. He comes back and he says, well, now that I read this, I can see I'm at level 4. And he's going to have an epiphany. Oh, yeah, that explains why this. And he might say also, and I can see that my girlfriend Gertrude is at level 5. No wonder we're having trouble. These are incompatible levels. See, I already know on the scale of sexuality, you must be at a compatible level in order for it to work. If
So
you're not at
it
a
doesn't matter
compatible
if
level,
you're at the top or the bottom, so long as you both at the same level, that's what really matters.
I'm not saying same level, no. I'm saying on the scale of sexuality, remember every scale is unique. You must be at a compatible level. If you actually look at the scale, you can see that some of these levels are distinctly incompatible. It's not subtle. Level 4 is can have sex, and level 5 is cannot have sex. Well, duh. If that's the case, it's not going to happen, right? So he has realizations about this. Oh yeah, now I understand what's going on with this. See? Then you say, wait a minute, let me show you something else. And you open up the book to the scale of allegiance. Now, anytime a relationship deteriorates, it's always because allegiance deteriorates. These people got together at some point because they were in love or something like that, right? So there was this allegiance, okay? You're the babe for me, you know? And so now they're not getting along so well. So one or both of them has gone down the scale of allegiance. And just to give you an example, right? So he's going out with Gertrude. Well, he cheats on her and he goes out with Rose, right? That's a deterioration of allegiance. So he goes through the same process. He says, scale of allegiance. I never heard of this. You say, well, yeah, look at it and see if you can spot where you are as far as your allegiance with Gertrude. And he'll look at it, see, and he'll find the bracket. He'll say, well, definitely it's not 1. I can see that right off. And it's not 6 or 7. It's got to be 2, 3, 4, or 5. And so you say, okay, read the book, the chapter, and then you can get it exactly. So he reads it, you help him, and he comes back and says, I can see that I'm at level 3. And he will have a realization. He'll say, oh, that explains up and up and up and up what's happening with me. Yeah, level 3, that's it. That's what I'm doing. So, and he might also spot her at the same time, see, because he knows her. See? So now I could keep doing this with a half a dozen more scales because when you have a romantic relationship, that's complicated. It has many dimensions to it. So you might have 8 or 10 or 12 scales that are going to apply to this, where he looks at it in this context and he says, oh, yeah, I see how this makes sense. See? Now, by the time this guy has been through 8 or 10 or 12 of these epiphanies, because he has one for each scale, this problem is going to be unraveling in his mind. Now, this could go a couple of ways. One way is he could say, you know, I'm going to show this book to Gertrude, and we're going to use this to figure this out and solve this. See, could go that way. Or another way it could go is he could say, I'm done with this woman. This is not going anywhere. This is a waste of my time. Now, don't think if it's the second choice, then he's going to be bummed out about it. He will not. He will be happy because he's finding the truth. See, every time you have an insight, it's, oh, yeah, now I see
Feeling
what's going on here. See, so it doesn't matter what level he finds, he's going to be happy.
because
So
you find out the
he
truth.
gets rid of Gertrude. He says, Gertrude, we're done. And the next time you see him, he's smiling. See, he's not complaining about this anymore. He's now looking for a new girlfriend. So that's like a perfect example of how you could use this. Now, you cannot possibly come up with a situation regarding human affairs that this does not apply to. It doesn't matter if it's business, finances,
Po-
career,
Politics.
family, whatever it is. You can always find scales that are going to analyze this and that are going to bring you to realization. Now, once you find your level, you can move up to the next level up. So that's improved. So let's
So,
say we're at
so,
level 4, you can move up to level 3.
so does the book cover like action items or instructions or recommendations on how to go from level two to one for a given skill?
Yes, yes. There's a whole section in the book about how to use this book on yourself to move yourself up to the next level on any scale. It doesn't matter what scale, the instructions are the same. And there's an even longer section on how to use this book to move someone else up to a higher level.
Mm.
It's very specific. So let me give you another example. Most people have kids, and
Mhm.
most kids have trouble in school, right? So dad sees that his daughter is having trouble with math. So he says, come over here, daughter, let me help you with this. And he shows her the scale of scholarship. So let's assume she's 12 years old, so she's able to read this, right? So she looks at this. She knows she's a scholar. She knows she's having trouble in school. She says, scale of scholarship. I never heard of this. And he says, yes. Where are you on the scale? That will help you to figure out what's going on with your schooling. She's going to want to know that. So she's going to look at it in a matter of seconds. I mean, 20, 25 seconds. She's going to find a bracket. She's going to say, well, I can see right away 1, 2, or 3 do not apply to me because I'm not that great a student. See, and I can also see that 6 and 7 don't really apply to me. So it's got to be like 3, 4, 4 or 5. Okay, so let's have you read the text and get this exactly. And she's going to want to do that because you're opening a door for her. So she reads it, she comes back, she says, well, I can see I'm at level 5. That's not so good. And the dad says, well, you know what? We can move you to level 4 and then you'll be a better student. She says, you can? Yes. So you follow the instructions in the chapter, which tells you with specificity how to make a better scholar. There's no vagueness here. Okay. So the dad works with her. She becomes a better scholar and she moves up from level 5 to level 4. Now, instead of getting C's and D's, she's getting B's and C's. See, she's going to be happy. She's going to say, thanks, Dad. So,
And and does this and does this do these recommendations cover aspects of that are unique to people because people have different talents, they have different things they like, they have different things they tend to be good at versus not good at. What if you are talking about a skill, let's say something like, I don't know, skill of politics, for instance. Let's say somebody that has already picked a side or somebody that is having trouble understanding the other side of the aisle, for instance. How do you address the uniqueness when you go from person to person? uniqueness
Okay.
of the culture
Well,
or the
first of all, you have to realize this is natural law. These scales are correct the same way that the Pythagorean theorem is correct, the
Right.
same way that the periodic table is correct, the same way that Newton's three laws of motion are correct. They're not correct because I think they're correct. My opinion is irrelevant. There's no opinion in this. I just observed it and wrote it down. Okay, so this is like when Fibonacci figured out Fibonacci sequence. So if you look at pine cones and shells and sunflowers, you can actually count it, and you'll see that if you count the seeds one way, it's one Fibonacci number, and if you count it the other way, it's another Fibonacci number. Well, how does that happen? These sunflowers don't know anything about math, let alone Fibonacci, right? And they've been like this for millions of years. And it's
So you just
because it's
observe something
natural
that is
law.
naturally occurring.
Right, right. So look, I know that the acceleration of gravity at the surface of the Earth is 10 meters per second per second. Okay, that's not my opinion. You don't have to take my word for it. Go out there with a golf ball and a stopwatch. You can calculate it yourself. I'll give you the formula. Okay, so everybody in the science world knows that. That's established. Okay, so every time you try to launch an aircraft or a rocket, that's what you're dealing with. Okay, it has nothing to do with whether or not the pilot is a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or
Yeah.
anything else. Okay, it's gotten so that is how this book works.
Like
This is
the law of physics. You can't really, you just have to deal with it. It's there, and whether or not you like it,
that's right,
just live
and
with it.
that's good news because every person is at some level on every scale. So the data is just sitting there waiting for you to use it. So when you go, let's say, through the scale of choice, you say, oh, yeah, this explains how I behave. Level 4, the scale of choice. You see, you have an epiphany. That explains why I do this and this and this, and don't do that and that and that. You see? So your mind is clearer, and you can use that same skill to look at your girlfriend. Where is she on this? See? Oh, she's at level 5. Well, that explains why we have arguments. See, she's at a different level. So she processes this in a different way. So, first of all, just knowing the correct level is a
It's very
big
useful.
help.
Yeah.
Yes. So, let me tell you something that happens with this all the time, which goes to the question you just asked. A person will be looking at this, right? And he's not thinking about, for example, his father in law. He's not thinking about his father in law. He's just looking at the book, right? So he'll get down to, let's say, level 4, and he'll say, wait a minute. This is my father-in-law. This is exactly how he is. Boppity, 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 bop. He behaves just like this. See? This happens all the time. He's not even thinking about his father-in-law. But the data is so precise,
Compelling.
he can see it. You know, it's like if I said to you, look, I've got this animal in my house. It's got fur, it's got 4 legs, it's got a tail, and it's got whiskers, and it goes meow, meow, meow. You're going to say, well, that's a cat.
Correct.
Oh, is that what it is? See, that's I give you a very specific analysis of what's going on. Now, I have to tell you, the reason that I publish this is that I know KNOW that these scales are correct. The way I know that the formula for the volume of a sphere is
Yeah.
correct. Okay. Okay. So like when I was working in engineering, math, and physics and such, there's certain things you just know. You accept it. That's the whole point of science. That is the mission of science, to establish facts. Okay. So there was a time when people did not know that the acceleration of gravity was 1 meter per second per second. Now we know that. So that is how society and technology advances. So this is a kind of a conceptual technology, except that it applies to people. Now, let me tell you why this is valuable to you. If you take your car around on the road, there's all kinds of signage, right? It says, stop sign, no left turn, speed limit is 45 miles an hour, there's a double yellow line, okay? you have to obey those by law. In fact, in every jurisdiction that I know of, you have to take a test to prove that you know these things in order to get a license, because it's the law. Now, if you take your car out on the road and you ignore that signage, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. You could get a ticket. You could get arrested. You could have your license taken away. You could kill somebody. You could
Or
crash your car.
yourself. Yeah.
Right. There's 1,000 bad things that can happen, right? So if you have any brains at all, you obey it. Okay, well, that's a double yellow line. I'm not going to go across it. See, that is what this book is like. I am telling you where the edge of the road is. So that is why I can absolutely guarantee that this book will prevent, if you use it, catastrophes, disasters, dilemmas, lawsuits, bankruptcies, indictments, fistfights,
What about
divorces,
wars?
because yeah, and wars too, because you can see these people who are at lower levels. This happens to me all the time. I'll bump into somebody online or in 3 dimensions, and I see that this guy is at a low level on a certain scale. And I say, whoa, I'm not going to mess with this. Have a nice day. Goodbye. See? Now, it works the other way too, because I'll meet people who are upscale people. Like you meet somebody and say, oh, this is an upscale person. She's at or near the top of a whole bunch of scales. This is somebody I want in my life. Now, I'm finding 100% of the time that that works. I look at a person, I can assess this person across certain skills. I know this person is going to be an asset to me because it's an upscale person, as opposed to somebody like Hitler or Stalin,
And do you
who were
deduce that?
downscale persons.
Do you deduce that by asking specific questions around that specific skill, or is that something that comes to you naturally across normal conversations? I mean,
Okay,
specifically you.
okay. First of all, the main thing is it's about observation. If
Yeah.
you shut up and pay attention, listen, watch the person will tell you his level. It comes right out of his mouth.
Mm.
People tell you their levels. And if you study the book, you'll see, yeah, I can see this is exactly what this guy said to me, right?
Because now I'm wondering what my level is for this skill, and what my spouse level is, and what my friends levels are, and I'm like,
Right, right.
damn.
So get the book and you can figure it out. You can figure out your level on every scale. And on some scales, because it's context driven, you can get different levels. So, for example, your motivation toward your mother could be completely different from your motivation toward your father. And that could be completely different from your motivation toward your girlfriend, right? So it's the same scale, different application.
Mm-hmm. Because it's context driven, it's based on context.
That's right. That's right. Now, the general scales are not like that, but the general scales tend to be big. Like when you find your level on the scale of basic purposes, it's a life changing moment because what happens is you say, oh, that's what I'm about. This explains my whole life. And what happens is you throw out the other 6 levels. They are not for you. This is your basic purpose, and that's what you're trying to do all the time. And once you understand that, you save yourself a lot of trouble because you're not wasting your energy on things that have nothing to do with you.
So when did you find out about your basic purpose? When was the day that you had that epiphany yourself?
Oh, I don't remember that. I mean,
It's been a
I
long
mean, I've had hundreds of realizations regarding different scales at different times over the years. You have to realize I've been meditating every day for 40 years. So I have all kinds of realizations as a result of that anyway. So I can't remember anything specific, especially since it never occurred to me that it would even be relevant.
time.
Also, I want to clarify I tell everyone never tell anyone the level of any person on any scale. It's unethical and counterproductive. So if you come to me and say, Jim, where am I on the scale of personal influence, I'm going to say, it's not for me to say, you study it and you figure it out for yourself. Because when you get it, you will have a realization. So
So
if I
there's
if I
value in
tell you,
figuring it out on your own.
right, but it's not hard. It's not hard. For example, I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents before him who I studied, such as Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson. So once you know somebody's basic purpose, their whole life comes into focus. You say, oh, well, no wonder he's doing that. That's his basic purpose. See? So, for example,
About their
I know
basic purpose as people or as president.
as what? I didn't hear you.
Basic purpose of all these previous presidents. Were you looking at it as their basic purpose as a function of their role or
No,
as a
no,
person?
that's a general skill. It's got nothing to do with context. That
Mm,
person has a basic purpose.
mm,
And if you just observe the person, you can see what it is. Okay? So, and I'll give you an example. When Obama was running for president, most of us had no idea who he was. He had only been in the Senate for 2 years. Now, the people from Illinois knew who he was because they sent him to the Senate. But for us in the other 49
correct.
states, we
Yeah.
didn't know who's this guy with this funny name running for president. So I said, well, I'm going to have to find out who this guy is. See?
Mhm.
As opposed to, well, he ran against John McCain, well, I knew all about John McCain. He had been around for what, 30 or 40 years, right?
Mhm.
But I didn't. So I conducted a study. I took the time to listen to his speeches, to observe his body language, and eventually it was obvious to me what his basic purpose was. I said, okay, now I understand who this guy is. And that informs whether or not I'm going to vote for him. I'm not going to tell you what I concluded because that would be unethical. You can figure it out yourself. It's not that hard. And let me tell you how easy this is. Let's say you said to me, Jim, come over to my house. I want to show you my garden, right? I don't even know if you have a house or garden. What if you did? I would come over and I'd say, oh, hello, Armel, very nice. You've got tulips, you've got hydrangeas, you've got nasturtiums, chrysanthemums, roses, lily of the valley. And the reason I can do that is because I know flowers. I happen to know flowers. Now, if you get some 5-year-old kid in your garden, that's not going to happen. He's just going to come in and look around and say, oh, these are pretty and they smell nice. That's
Mhm.
all he knows. He can't analyze anything. He didn't study botany. See? Now, most people are like that little kid as regards humans.
I'm probably amongst one
Yeah.
of the crowd. That's how I
they
feel.
they
Yeah.
don't know what they're looking at. And I'll give
Ah,
you a perfect example. Okay, so I'm a serious student of military science. Okay?
okay.
So I'm a student of history in general. So when I was studying World War II, and of course the central character is Hitler, and
Mhm.
I saw these different things that he did, I would scratch my head and say, why did he do that? That doesn't make any sense. Now, he made 6 or 8 catastrophic mistakes. Forget about the fact that he's a psychopathic murderer. Just
Mhm.
from a military point of view, he made horrendous mistakes. Okay, and his
Like
generals,
strategic or tactical mistakes in war.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and his generals were telling him, "Don't do this." Okay, for example, Hermann Goering, who was second in command, told him, "If the Soviet Union gets in the war, we will lose." And that's exactly what happened. Okay,
So he didn't care.
the Soviets lost 20 million people in the war, but they had such a huge population, there was nothing the Nazis could do to stop them. So the kill rate would be 10 to 1. The Nazis would mow them down, and there'd just be another 10,000 Russians behind them. Okay, so if he had listened to Goering, Goering was not an idiot. Goering was much better educated than Hitler was. He never would have invaded Russia. Why did he invade Russia? They had a treaty, and they had a non-aggression pact so that he wouldn't have to fight a two-front war. So I could go through many different examples of what things he did that were just stupid. Okay. Now I'm looking at this as a student of military science and saying, I don't get this. Well, this doesn't make any sense. Until I figured out his basic purpose. His basic purpose was level 7, the purpose to destroy. That is his basic purpose. Now, many people say, why would somebody have that for basic purpose? Well, fortunately, there aren't too many people like that. But if you study the man, then it makes sense. He was destructive. He was not only destructive to the Allies, he was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to his own family. He was destructive to Germany. Okay? He was just a destructive person.
So he
And
should
if
have
people,
never ended up with that kind of power, but somebody with his basic, um, I was going to say basic principle, but with his
basic purpose.
basic purpose, having been in the position he was, is a bad, bad mixture.
That's right. That's right. And I can absolutely guarantee you, if the people of Germany had this book in 1933, the Nazis would not have come to power because they would have read it and said, this guy's destructive. Okay? And so a lot of them who voted for him would not have voted for him. Now, they got 37% of the vote in 1933, which was a plurality. Now, would they have gotten some votes? Of course. You know who would have voted for them? Psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists,
But those are not the
anti-Semites,
majority of the
racists.
population, though.
But that's not 37%.
Yes.
Okay? So that's why I say this book can indemnify you against terrible things happening. I mean, you know, I meet people all the time in one context or another, professionally, personally. I meet a lot of people. Okay. And I'll look at this person, I'll see, oh, this person is at this low level. No thanks. No thanks.
And you don't have to
So,
answer this. So just based on our conversation, have you done like a similar assessment of myself, of where I might be on, say, the
because I just met you.
oh, it takes multiple interactions, engagements to be able to
It
figure.
doesn't necessarily take multiple interactions, but you have to observe the person.
Oh,
It's just like what I said about your garden. I don't know what's in your garden if you have a garden. I don't know if you have tulips or roses. But if I go there and I look at them, then I can see, oh, yeah, those are tulips. Those are roses. Those are nasturtiums. See? But I got to go and look at it. That's why I explained
so
about Obama.
it does take observation and engagement of some sort to figure it out.
Yes. Yes. If you know the material and you study the person, you will get it. Now, now, let me give you an example of how easy this is to use. This is not hard to do. About 22 years ago, I'm talking to a buddy of mine about politics and government. Just two guys standing around talking, right? And I, at the time, had this book in a transcript form. I was writing the book. And I thought, wait a minute, let me show you something. So I pull out the scale of government, which by then was complete. And I handed it to him. I did not say a word. I just gave it to him. So he took it, he looked at it, and in 1 second he pointed. He said, there, I'm right there. He found his level on that scale without my even suggesting that that's what it was for. That's how easy it is to use.
Wow,
He looked at it and said, yep, there, I'm right there. See? And that's true for many of these. This is not hard to use. Now, having said that, let me explain this. This is all about insight. When a person is high on any scale, it's because he has insight in that area. When a person is low on any scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. So this book, it requires some insight in order to use it, but it also develops your insight. So when you spot your level on a certain scale, you have a realization. So, oh, okay, now I see what's happening here. Now, when you go to use another scale, you are a more insightful person than you were when you looked at the first scale. And when you look at the second
Yeah.
scale, you're going to be more insightful. So it's going to be even easier for you to say, oh, yeah, I see. I'm at level 3. Yeah. Bing, bing, bing. You have a realization. And so the more you use this, the more insightful you become. And the more insightful you become, the easier it is to use. So this is a virtuous cycle, meaning the more as you use this, you advance. You
So,
just get more insightful. And so you might have a certain scale that you can't figure out what level you're at, right? You, and that which probably means you're at a lower level. So you come back with 6 months later after you've used the other 34 scales and say, oh, now I see. I'm down here at level 5. I couldn't see that before.
so what has all of this taught you about human nature? I'm kind of trying to see, is this something that truly applies just to humans, or let's say, would it apply to all other types of, you know, living beings or creatures? Does it apply to monkeys? Does it apply to aliens? Because
So notice the book is called Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
okay,
And the subtitle is Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs. Okay? I don't think this has any application to animals at all. Okay? Now, we could get into speculation, but well, does this apply to people on other planets?
yeah,
Could be. Could be. Because, there's a lot of evidence, massive amount of evidence. Okay? I've seen photographs that there are people from other planets that look just like us. And some of them look very similar to us, but just a little bit different. I mean, less different than the difference between you and me, right? There's,
yeah.
you and I look very different from one another, right? But we still
Or with the
comply with these. So, does it apply to ETs? Maybe
maybe,
it does. I don't have any database for that. So that's speculative. But that's why I say human phenomena. So if you have anything regarding humans, this book helps you. Now, it's not going to help you to fix your radio. You need an electronics book to do that. It's not going to help you fix your car. You need an auto mechanic book. But it will help you to figure out what's going on with your wife and with your son and with your boss and with your grandmother and with your next door neighbor. And even
it's
if you
very
can't
useful if you ask.
even if you
But
can't do anything about it, right? Let's say you figure out that your next door neighbor, his basic purpose is level 6, which is criminal. Okay. The basic purpose of a criminal is pleasure. That's what motivates them. They want pleasure. They want drugs, alcohol, sex,
and they don't care about the
food.
consequences of their wants and needs.
So you might spot that. Oh, this guy's at level 6. That tells you a lot. That tells you don't want to get friendly with this guy. This is a dangerous guy. Because you have to realize that criminals, they don't particularly want to kill you, but they will if you get in their way. So you have some drug dealer, right? He doesn't have anything against you. But if you do something that is going to endanger his drug trade, he will take you out.
Yeah.
Not particularly because he wants you dead, just because he wants to get that $1 million that he's going to get so that he can use it to buy food and
Or
yachts, cars, and houses, and he wants pleasure. So you even if you can't do anything about it with some people, it informs you.
that this tells
So for example, I know Donald Trump's basic purpose, and I know Joe Biden's basic purpose. I'm not going to say what they are, but it's a
that would be
doable
very
thing.
helpful for a lot of us to know
It's a,
what their basic
get the
purpose is.
book. Look, these people have been. Biden has been in the public eye for 50 years.
So
Okay,
if you knew how to use this book, you would easily know what his basic purpose is. Very easily.
well, how easy it is up to the person because some people are more insightful than others. Some people are smarter than others. Some people understand the words better than others. But it's knowable. Donald Trump has also been in the public eye for 50 years. I'm from New York. He was in the papers every day when I was growing up. Okay. He was famous from the 70s.
Wow.
So I know all about him. So there's no mystery to me. Now, I talked about basic purpose, but I could also go into, I know what their motivations are. I know how they are, where they are on the scale of choice. I know where they are on the scale of personal influence, and so
So,
forth and so on.
so are there certain skills that you consider more? I know there's two boxes, right? There's skills that are based on context, that are general skills. So, do you have some type of a hierarchy of skills? What skill do you consider, just generally speaking, as most important versus the least important skill? Do you have anything like that?
Well, I have my own ideas about people in general, but
Because
this
basic
book
purpose
this
skill sounds
book
like one of those
gives
skills
you
that are really
gives you this book gives you natural law. There is this scale. It exists. It's been there all along. Look, almost everybody who's older than maybe 6 years old on Earth knows that the Earth goes around the sun, right?
Mhm.
That's what we call the heliocentric theory. Okay. Now, 1,000 years ago, most people didn't know that. Okay. Some people knew it, but 2,000 years ago, most almost everybody thought that the sun went around the Earth. Okay. So the fact that the Earth has been going around the sun for billions of years is completely separate from whether or not people know that. So now, those of us who study, we find this out in grade school and we understand the cosmos, okay? But that is what Septemics is like. In other words, these scales were there long before I wrote the book. I just I just was able to observe them
Yeah, you stumbled into it
and
very.
write them down. So I was like a guy walking along a lonely road by himself and finds $100 bill, picks it up, puts it in his pocket.
Whether or not you went over there, that dollar bill was there. You just happened to find it.
Yeah, and I just happened to find it. And so then, because I'm in the business of helping people, I thought this can really help people. And let me tell you something. Since the first version of this came out, that's 28 years now, okay, 1995. I have been watching people use this for 28 years. People get it. This is not hard to get. You don't need a college degree to get this. You do need to be able to read English reasonably well.
Mhm.
Uh, and you do have to be motivated to improve yourself or others. Now, there are some people who think that everyone wants to improve themselves or others, and I'm sorry that's not true. There's all kinds of people who are not interested in improving themselves or others. That would include war criminals, professional criminals, serial murderers, psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists. They're not interested in improving themselves or others. They're interested in cleaning out your bank account and stealing your wife, right? So I have actually calculated that approximately 50% of the human race is interested in improving oneself or improving the people around them.
Wow, that's huge. And how did you come up with that number? Is it based on
Well, it's if you study the scales, okay, for example, if you look at the scale of basic
about 50% of people? Okay, okay, go ahead. I think I get
look
it.
at the scale of basic purposes, it's crystal clear, it's undeniable that people at levels 5, 6, or 7 are not interested in improving themselves or others. That's a lot of people. Okay. Then you go to, let's say, the scale of choice. Okay. And you look at the bottom of the scale of choice and you look at how those people are. Those people are not interested in improving anybody. These are the people who would vote for Hitler or Stalin. Okay. Because they're at the bottom of the scale. So if you just look at all the scales and realize how it crosses the demography, It's about 50%. Plus, you have to realize that I've had a lifetime of helping people. So I've had a lot of opportunity to see people who want help and people who don't want help. And there's
Yeah.
large categories of people. So, for example, take the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people in the KKK not interested in improving themselves or others.
Yeah.
Okay, people in the Nazi Party are not interested in improving themselves or others. People in the mafia are not interested in improving themselves or others, because if they were, they wouldn't be in those groups. They would be regular people like us. So, and think about how many of those groups there are.
Yeah, and what you're saying is like from somebody that has no insight. I actually it kind of makes sense because there's this general belief, right, that people are good. It doesn't matter, like people are fundamentally good, and just because of their circumstance or certain situations, then they start acting bad. But I've always been of the opinion that, not everybody is necessarily good, and maybe people are not fundamentally good. People are just fundamentally out there to protect their own interest, and sometimes that interest actually um, is at odds with the public good or the greater good, and therefore, in that context, they really don't care about how it affects everybody. They just care about themselves. Basically, people can be really selfish, and sometimes that means, doing things that might help them, protect them, but hurt others. And sometimes even more people are going to be hurt versus the people that are going to be helped by whatever action they're taking.
Right.
And it sounds almost politically incorrect to say, but when you say about 50% of people are basically bad, not because, they're evil, it's just because of their basic purpose. That's just how they are wired in some sense.
Well, if your basic purpose is to destroy, that's evil.
That's evil. Yeah. But saying
But
that
look, but
sounds
look,
so wrong to say, but that might actually just be the truth.
let me tell you something. It is a well established fact in the mental health community that psychopaths and sociopaths do not improve in therapy. That has been established.
Whoa, really?
So, yes. So you get some sociopath, let's say some professional criminal, some anti Semitic Nazi.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how good a therapist you are, they're not going to improve. We already know that. So, what I'm saying is, you can't get to the bottom of those people and figure them out. See, you could get some guy who, and let's say you have a guy who hates women, right? And he goes into therapy. And after a while, he realizes it goes back to his mother and the nuns and blah, blah, blah. And, and he lets go of it. Okay. Well, this guy's not a sociopath. He's just a guy who was all screwed up with women. Okay. So you can fix that. So the guy comes out of it. Now he likes women. See,
Hmm.
that's the benefit he got from it. But if you try to do that to somebody like Vito Genovese, Vito Genovese was the head of one of the five mafia families. He was a known psychopathic murderer. Just look at a photo of the guy. It's frightening. You couldn't do anything to that guy in therapy. So let me give you an example the other way.
This is
You know
so
who Albert Speer is?
no.
Albert Speer was a top-ranking Nazi during World War II. Okay, Albert Speer was an architect. He was Hitler's architect. He was a young man, and Hitler loved him. And Speer risked his life to countermand Hitler's orders in order to protect the German people. And Hitler let him get away with it because Hitler liked him. So in 1945, they had the War Crimes Tribunal in Nuremberg, where they had 20 Nazis on trial at the same time. Well, Albert Speer was one of them. Albert Speer, when he testified, he said, yes, I did this. I regret it. I did the wrong thing. And I was kind of in a situation where I really didn't have much of an alternative, but it still was wrong and I shouldn't have done it. They did not give him the death penalty. 17 of those 20 defendants were given the death penalty. Spear was one of them. They gave him 20 years. He served his 20 years, and he wrote a very good book in which he explains everything that went on that he knew about in the Third Reich and what he did, what he saw, and he explained it from the viewpoint that we could identify with. Yes, this was bad. I mean, it's like not every Southerner who owned a slave was an evil person. Many of them were, but some of them were just sort of, well, my dad owns the slaves and he doesn't listen to me. What am I going to do? That type of thing. So even in the mafia, even in the Nazis, even in the KKK, you have maybe a few people who are not evil people. And they're there because their father pushed them into it or whatever, like, for example,
The
Carlo.
culture today and the way things, what is generally accepted in that
Yes,
culture, and you have
that's
to
right.
categorize
That's
things.
right. That's right. That's right. When George Washington was growing up, everybody he knew had slaves. He was in a certain social strata. He was born into a family that had slaves. He grew up with slaves, and his friend George Mason had slaves, and then everybody else he met, like Thomas Jefferson, who lived in the same. They had so he sort of thought, well, this is what's going on. That doesn't mean he was an evil person.
He was
So
born into the society, and then
that's right.
exactly where they had.
That's, that's right. So now, were some of them evil? Yes, some of them were evil. So that's why you would need to use this. And I'll give you a perfect example. Carlo Gambino, head of the Gambino crime family. The Gambino family was the most numerous and most powerful and the richest of all the mafia families in New York.
Yeah.
And it's because of Carlo Gambino. Carlo Gambino was not an evil person. Carlo Gambino was born into the mafia. His father was in the mafia. And when he grew up, his father said, well, this is how we make money, and you're going to take my place. And Carlo said, okay. But if you actually study Carlo Gambino, which I have done, you know a lot about him. He was not an evil person. He was not a destructive person. Now, did he have people killed? Yes. Obama had people killed.
Every leader has, every president.
That's right. That's right. They all have people killed. So I'm not saying that it's okay to be in the mafia. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying he was different from Vito Genovese. Vito Genovese, and I grew up in New York, so I was kind of around a lot of these people. He was a scary dude. Carlo Gambino was like a regular guy. He was like a regular guy. He just happened to be in, and they never got anything on him. He died of a heart condition at age, I think, 76 in his house, his beautiful house. They couldn't get anything on him. You know why? He was smart. He was not stupid like many of the mafioso. So
He
he
was
never
like
drove it.
a brutal murderer, just vicious, just killing people. He was calm. He was thoughtful. He was.
That's right. That's right. And Carlo Gambino, in his day, the rule was nobody in my family deals drugs. If you deal drugs, we kill you. Okay? Yes. And they would find some guy dealing drugs, they'd have him killed. That was the rule. Okay? Another rule was we don't kill civilians. Anybody who's not in the mob, one way or another, is considered a civilian. The rule was we don't kill civilians unless we have a compelling reason, because you make a lot of trouble. So let's say you have some mafia guy, right? And he gets in some argument with some guy and he shoots him, that they get rid of that guy. He gets a bullet in the back of the head. We don't kill civilians, okay? Another rule was you never touch somebody else's wife. If you touch the wife of somebody else in the mafia, you die. Okay? So what I'm saying is, in his day, They
It's
had
a bit like
rules.
there were just laws that he tried to implement fairly.
Right. He was just running a very strict company. Okay. Now,
Rules.
did he have people killed? Oh, sure, he had people killed, and I'm not saying that's okay. But
That's a,
but the actual truth is, if you study this, and there are many books on it, most of the people that the mafia killed are other criminals.
that's
It's
correct. It's like gang violence, right? So you kill different teams, keep killing each
right,
other for different
right.
reasons.
But you see, the gangs that we have today, they don't have the moral code and the
Yeah, they don't have the
intelligence of Carlo Gambino. They're dopey people.
yeah.
See, he was smart. He never lived in a mansion. He never drove a Cadillac. Uh, and he was highly regarded by everybody. And if you see photos of him, he's smiling. He looks like a nice old guy. So, so I'm just saying, to me, Carlo Gambino is no worse than Vladimir Putin.
I see, I see, I see.
You know, it's a guy who used violence when necessary to achieve his ends, made himself very rich, smart guy. They're both smart people. If you listen to them speak, they're not stupid. But you'd have most of the mafia guys were dopey. Like
So the,
John Gotti. John Gotti died in prison. He deserved to die in prison. He was a violent thug. He murdered his own boss.
thing,
Okay, so
that's
that's
brutal.
so I'm saying you have to be careful, and that is why Septemics is useful. Now, since Carlo Gambino has been dead for many years, I'm going to tell you, on the scale of basic purposes, he was at level 4.
Level.
That's level 4, which is normal. He was a normal person. Now, I'm not saying he was normal because, in the sense that he was a professional criminal, obviously that's not normal. But in terms of his basic purpose, the basic purpose of a normal person is to conform. Okay, he wanted to fit in. He sent his son to the same college that I went to. See,
Wow. So
he had
you try to be, you don't try to stand out, especially not in a bad way. You just try to
right,
be
right, right,
it.
right. So he lived in like a regular house and drove a regular car. He looked like an ordinary guy, and I know people who knew him. You know, and they called him Don Carlo. He was respected. And when I say respected, I don't just mean the mafia respected him, the police respected him, the people in government respected him.
Meaning that he was one of those guys that actually, it's, I guess the question that comes to mind is, where does truth lies? Because I know, because basically what you're describing is, this book helps you get to the truth of who you are or who the person you're trying to understand is.
Exactly.
That, yeah, that's one thing.
Right.
How do you deal with somebody that is so delusional that they don't really care about what the truth is?
Okay. So let me explain this. When a person is at or near the top of the scale, it's because he has insight in that area.
Hmm.
When a person is at or near the bottom of the scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. And I can give you specific examples of that. But before I go into that, if you run into a guy who's at or near the bottom of the scale, he's going to have a lot of trouble dealing with that scale. Because he's got so much cognitive dissonance,
Dissonance,
he is not, he is so, see,
in denial.
if he was insightful, he wouldn't be at the bottom of the scale. So you look at Hitler, right? He did stupid things, stupid. Okay. I mean, not only was he crazy, he was stupid and he was ignorant on top of it all. Okay. So he was at level 7. He
That
had
begs
no
the question as
insight.
to how he got to the top of the food chain, but that's a completely different conversation.
So most people spend their entire lives at one level of that scale. So if you know someone's basic purpose and you don't see them for 10 years, when you come back in 10 years, he's still going to be at that level, probably.
So
It's
the
possible.
change over the lifespan of a person tend to be the same, huh? Unless unless you try to move up that scale. which
Well,
most people wouldn't tend to do.
it's very unusual for anyone to move on the scale of basic purposes. It is a persistent trait, as opposed to, for example, the scale of evaluation. People move on that by the minute. That changes all the time. It's what I call a volatile scale. It's volatile. But the scale of basic purposes, and let me put it this way. If you have some spectacular spiritual epiphany, like you're in meditation for 30 years, and you have then you might move up one level. Or if you have some terrible traumatic incident, like, for example, you're in a Nazi death camp, but you survive, that's probably going to knock you down one level. When that guy comes out of that death camp, he's not going to be the same person he was when he went in. Okay, he's
And
going to have
he usually moves down when it's
right.
traumatic.
Yeah, if it's a traumatic experience, it knocks you down, and if it's an uplifting experience, but it's very rare.
Very rare and seldom.
On that particular scale. Most of the other scales, it's much easier to move. So I know people who have been exposed to this book, and they have a lot of trouble using it because they're too far down the scale. So this tells you
That's very interesting because I can see and I see why that makes sense because if you find it's like finding out that something is wrong with you or at least you're part of the problem some way somehow whether you are part of that problem intentionally or not intentionally is a different proposition but find out that oh crap something might be wrong with me is not something that you'll be happy to find out. It's not something that is enjoyable. It's like it makes you feel uncomfortable to be like oh snap, I have a problem that I need to at least acknowledge. Acknowledging is painful by itself, but then having to do something about it is almost as if you're self-condemning in some way. It could feel like you're self-condemning in some ways, and that's not something that wouldn't be a popular thing to do, which is why I can see why somebody in that position will reject
right.
or
So let me
not.
give you some data about this. Something like 1% of the population is at or near the top of all the scales. A much larger group, something like maybe 4%, are at or near the bottom of all the scales. Okay? Most of us are high on some and low on others. And there are innumerable examples, and I'll give you a famous example that everybody knows. Okay? Bill Clinton is a very smart man. He was a Rhodes Scholar. If you listen to him speak, this is a smart person. Okay? It's not like listening to Biden who goes blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Clinton knows what he's talking about. Okay? Now, he did very well. He got elected, he got reelected, and he left office with a high approval rating. Okay? So,
Yeah.
so he's highly regarded. Now, if you look at his personal life, most people know that he's a serial abuser of women. This is no secret. This has been in the news for 40 years. Okay? That's why he wound up getting impeached. He did so many bad things to so many women that eventually some of them sued him. Some of them went to the media and complained about it. Okay? That's how he wound up getting impeached. Because they sued him and he got on the stand and he lied. That's perjury. Okay? And he suborned others to perjury. Okay? That was a big mistake on his part. So obviously, in that area, he lacks insight. If he had insight, he wouldn't behave that way. I mean, Juanita
And
Broderick,
what scale would that be? The scale of what? Of truth
the
or
scale of sexuality.
sexuality? Okay.
So Juanita Broderick went on video and told in great detail how he raped her. Okay? Totally credible witness. Okay? So all I'm saying is this is a perfect example of a person who's high on one scale and low on the scale of human ability. He's near the top. on the scale of sexuality, he's near the bottom. So that's true for most of us. So let's say you have a friend, right? This guy, he makes $4,000 a week. He lives in a beautiful mansion, right? But he can't get a date. Nobody will go out with him. Okay? So professionally, he's doing well, but personally, he's doing badly. Well, if you analyze the guy against these scales, you'll find that on the scale of relationships or on the scale of sexuality, he's at or near the bottom. You see? And that's so if you could get him to look at this and spot where he is, see, it's not going to be easy for him because he's at or near the bottom, and get him to see, well, yeah, I can see I'm at level 6. That's near the bottom of the scale. It's almost at the bottom. No wonder I'm having a lot of trouble with this. You see? Then you can move him up to level 5 and he'll do better. So he doesn't
On the
need you.
scale, okay, let me ask you a question about the scale. On the scale of relationships, right? Let's
Yeah.
say, let's say I analyze myself and I realize, wait, I'm at the level 7. I'm at the bottom of the scale, and I was trying to move up that scale. What are some of the things that you think I could start thinking about or consider doing to move
Okay.
up
So I have to reject the premise of your question because if you are at level 7 in the scale of relationships, you're not going to understand that scale. And if you don't understand it, you're not going to use it.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
So, so
that's a fair characterization of
you see,
okay.
so that's why I say about 50% of the human race is interested in improving themselves and others, and the other 50% are not. So this book is not for them. So look, let's take somebody like I mentioned, John Gotti, who died in prison, right?
Mhm.
When Gambino died, his cousin took over. Well, Gotti murdered that guy so he could take over. Okay, Gotti was. We know from FBI recordings, which I've heard, that he was an ignorant thug. He was not. He did not have the mental clarity of Carlo Gambino or Paul Castellano, who took over for Gambino. Okay, so what I'm saying is, if you try to give John Gotti this book, he'd say, "Get out of here! I'm not reading this book." He wouldn't read it. And if somehow you could get him to read it, he wouldn't understand it. But even if he did understand it, he wouldn't apply it because it's contrary to his way of life. His way of life is you take whatever you want, you hurt whoever's in your way, and if
Okay.
they bother you, you kill them.
With I actually first of all it does make sense. That sounds like practically speaking that makes a lot of sense to me. But let's say hypothetically, right? Let's say for some reason he decided that okay, if all you said is true, but however at the end of the day he decides that I want to improve myself. For some reason, this one character guy said, okay, I'm at or near the bottom of the scale of relationships, and I do want to get up for whatever reason. It could be, a lost daughter of his, a lost child, or a family member. Something happened to where you feel the need to climb up that ladder. What do you do?
Well, first of all, remember I said when you find your correct level, you have a realization.
A eureka moment, yes.
Right. So let's say a guy finds that he's at level 6 on the scale of sexuality. He says, I see what's going on here. Yeah, this describes me. All right, so if I want to do better, I should move up to level 5. You see, that could happen. But generally speaking, if a person is at the bottom of a scale at level 7,
Mhm.
good luck. Good luck with that.
Sticky. It's
He,
like
he's
it's
not
like
going
conservation of momentum. You're not moving. You really don't want to move. You just want to
right,
stay.
right. So the people who are interested in this book are people like you who want to be better. They want to help the people around them. And that's what this book is for. So If you have a family, you can use it to help your family. If you have a company, you can use it to help your employees. If you are a pastor, you can use it to help your parishioners. If you're a teacher, you can use it to help your students, and so forth and so on. So that
This
there's a
this
certain
has become a must read for me. I'm gonna tell you that. And next time I reach out, I'm gonna be telling you, um, that I've read your book, and I'm gonna be telling you what I learned and what I found out and how I used it, because this you're right. I've never heard anything like this. It's so unique, which is why it kind of piqued my interest. To be completely honest, first of all so confused, but now this is making a lot of sense. And then I'm like, it sounds like something that everybody actually does need. It doesn't matter if you are a
that's right,
Putin or Vladimir Putin, like everybody, it doesn't matter who you are. I can see how this can be useful to every human
right,
on the planet. But like you
yeah,
said, based of your research, again, about 50% of us just wouldn't care just
that's right,
because of the very fact that it is true, or the very fact that it does what it actually does. Like
right,
it lets you see the truth, and sometimes the truth is nasty. Sometimes we don't wanna know the
that's
truth
right.
or deal
But
with it.
remember, I've been watching this for 28 years. When a guy finds his level, he's relieved. He says, now I see what's going on.
I
Yeah,
really, I'm
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 down
gonna
here.
have to do my homework here. I
I'm
really
down here at level 6. I've got to move up to level 5. Now, let me tell you, if he's at level 6 and he tries to go to level 5, he will get there. He will. Now, how long it takes, what he has to do, how much trouble he has, etc. These are wild variables. Nobody knows that. But I'll tell you for sure, if he's at level 6 and he tries to go to 1, 2, 3, or 4, he will fail because it's too steep a gradient.
oh
So I'm giving you the gradients. I'm telling you, this is the next step up. So let me give you an example. I've worked as a physical trainer. Okay. So I could have some guy come to me and say, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I don't know what to do about this. Can you train me? Okay, I'll train you. So I'm not going to just give this guy a 100-pound barbell and say, go lift this, or say, go out and run 5 miles. That's malpractice.
yes,
I would say to him, all right, tell me about it. All right. And I'd listen and say, okay, you think maybe you could walk 1 mile every morning? See? And he's probably going to say, yeah, I think I could do that. Okay. So that's what I want you to do.
let's
I
do
want you to
that.
walk 1 mile every morning. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. Right? So at the end of the week, I say to him, how did you do? See? Now, if he says to me, this is killing me, I say, all right, just keep doing it. See? But if he comes to me and says, oh, I can do this now, this has gotten easy. I say, great, let's try 1.5 miles. You see? I'm finding the gradient for him.
Thank
That's
you.
what it is. Right? Or if a guy wants to build himself up, right? I say, I look at the guy, I say, well, you look like you can curl 15 pounds. Here, let's see you curl this 15 pounds. So I'm going to, and he says, oh, I could do this all day. This is too easy. Okay, fine. Try 20. And he gets 20, says, all right, well, now I can feel this, I can do maybe 12 of these. Okay, very good. So I want you to do 12 on each arm every day. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. See, that's finding the great. That's what I did with my clients for 40 years. I would pick up the guy at the level he was at, and I would move him to the next level up. And he would have an epiphany. He would say, now I see what's going on here. See? And he would walk away very happy. And sometimes he would say, I can see that this is all my fault. I'm the one who's getting drunk. I'm the one who's starting the fights. I'm the one who's yelling at my wife. See? But he's going to be happy about it because it's the truth. See, when you get to the truth, that's what an epiphany is. You are relieved by it. And he says, okay, I'm not going to do those things anymore. Very good. Now let's go on to something else. Now, let me give you a little analogy here to tell you how this works in a very clear way for everybody. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the time, the date, the location, and perhaps how to get there, right? So, needless to say, It's very difficult to get somewhere if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going, and you don't know how to get to your destination. Now, this sounds idiotic, but most people do this regularly. In fact, some people do this continuously.
Wow, that does sound idiotic.
So think about this. When you find your level on any scale, you're finding out where you are. And when you know where you are, the next level up is where you're going to go if you're going to advance. So you know your destination. See? Now, as far as how to get there, because you asked me about that before, let me explain. Basic datum of engineering is that 90% of finding the right answer is asking the right question. When
Absolutely.
you have a bunch of smart guys and they're trying to solve it and trying to solve it, and they can't solve it, you know why? They're asking the wrong question. That is how Einstein found E equals mc squared in the theory of relativity. He
Right.
asked a different question and he was able to answer that question. Because remember, 90% of finding the answer is asking the right question. So
Yeah, because
engineers use this all the time. What am I not asking here? See? So this guy's got this airplane, it's not working, right? And he's got to fix it. And they can't get it working. So he's, all right, so what am I not asking? Did I check the fuel lines? All right, we didn't check the fuel lines. Let's check them. Okay. Did I check uh, the airfoils? Are they working properly? You see? So
this
you
is
have to ask, when you ask the right question, and you say, okay, the fuel line is clogged, clean it out. Then the
do you
plane
think
works.
do you think this is something that people from ancient civilizations understood about humanity? Or is this, do you think, because this thing sounds like, it almost sounds like a natural law that I feel like with how long humans have existed, somebody should have at least, because what you're saying in some ways almost sounds intuitive to me. I just couldn't, you just can't put a finger on it. But once you frame it, I'm like, aha, that actually does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, it's like you know it, it's like you can feel it, but you have a hard time putting your finger on what that is. But what you're saying is, I feel like it's true because if you, and that's natural, like if you ask the right questions, then that prompts your brain to start thinking in a certain direction, which more often
Right.
than not leads you to the correct answer. And so I wonder if this framework of thinking, in your view, in your opinion, do you think that this is something that at some point in our past humans had known for any
Well,
reason?
first of all, that's a speculation. You know,
It is.
we don't know what they knew in Atlantis or Lemuria. We don't know what the Chinese knew 4,000 years ago. We don't know what the Egypt, well, there's a lot of unknowns. So it's speculative. But let me tell you this. I went to school for 28 years and was an honor and scholarship student at every level. Okay. I'm a very well read person. I know ancient history. I've read all the great documents of history, the Tao Te Ching and the Ramayana and Cicero and etc. I read all that stuff. Okay. There's
You
nothing,
from
there's
the
nothing
Sumerian Catholic
like
background?
this in anything that I have seen. Okay. Now, let me ask you something. If you study physics, okay, one of the first things you learn fairly early on is the three laws of motion,
Yes.
okay, which were discovered by uh, Isaac Newton about 400 years ago. Now, once you see them and you know them, they seem intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, of course, if an object is going in a straight line and no force acts upon it, it just keeps moving in that straight line. Of course,
Of course,
but it took Isaac Newton, a genius, to figure this out. Why did nobody figure it out before Isaac Newton?
or did they?
Maybe somebody did, but we don't know that. See, it wasn't handed down to us. So all I'm saying is this is like, for example, Nikola Tesla invented the alternating current motor. Okay. He knew that direct current had such severe problems that there should be a way to solve those problems by creating an alternating. and he just formed it in his head. He saw the whole thing in his mind, and then he went into the physical world and built it. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's what everybody in the world is using, alternating current. So how come he figured it out and nobody else figured it out?
Yeah.
Edison didn't figure it out. Edison got the direct current system that had all kinds of serious problems, very, very limited, that was solved, completely solved by Tesla's alternating current motor. So you could say this about all kinds of things. I mean, like, the heliocentric theory is also referred to as the Copernican theory, named after Copernicus, because about 500 years ago, he propounded this theory that the Earth was going around the sun. Okay? And Galileo latched onto that and was put in prison for the rest of his life because he propounded that, because the Catholic Church didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So, how come nobody figured? Now, I happen to know from my study of ancient history, the heliocentric theory was first propounded by Aristarchus of Samos 300 BC. So it took 1,800 years for this to become widely known.
Really? 300 BC?
Yes, 300 BC.
Wow.
So you see, if you study these ancient writers, as I have done, you find out about these things. But still, it took 1,800 years until Copernicus propounded it. Well, I guess the human race advanced in 1,800 years, but still, Galileo propounded it. He got in a lot of trouble because he propounded that. The Catholic Church didn't want this known. Oh no, this is heresy. Now they could have killed him for it, and the reason they didn't is because he was so popular and so famous and so widely admired that they thought, well, we don't want to go down that road, so we're just going to put him under house arrest for the rest of his life, which is what they did. So this is an old story. Like, how about the Fibonacci sequence? All right, so we've had living creatures constructing themselves according to Fibonacci numbers for billions of years. And Fibonacci came along and he looked at these numbers and he said, wait a minute, there's some kind of a pattern here. And he figured out the formula, the Fibonacci formula. Now, once he gave it to us, we now know, and we now know all of the Fibonacci numbers to infinity by that formula. Okay, so how come Fibonacci figured it out?
And nobody else did.
Right. That's the same question you're asking me. So I was in the right place at the right time because I had a career of helping people. And because I'm a polymathic scholar, I was able to recognize this for what it was. And I saw that it could help people. And so that's why I wrote the book. And that's why I'm doing this interview. So people like you can find out about it and improve your life. Because my motto is, your success is my reward. Wow. That's what I want. Because there are people all over the world now reading this book and using it. Okay? There's people in not only the United States, but in UK, Canada, Australia, South Africa, all over, English-speaking people in Europe, all over Europe, reading this book. I'm never going to meet those people. I'm never going to know their names, but they are using it to better their lives. That was my mission. That's why I wrote this, and it works. And the reason it works is it's natural law. Now, I hope it doesn't take 1,800 years to catch on, but I wouldn't be shocked if it did, because,
we have an internet for one.
Einstein's theory of relativity, there's actually two of them that were the general and the specific. They were not accepted right away. It took years. And to this day, there are still some people who question it. Now, for me, I've studied it, I understand it perfectly. There's no way you're going to talk me out of that being true. It's so just like the three laws of motion.
Do you think your framework could be, if because I'm thinking I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. Let's say some bad actor got a hold of your book and truly understood it and was able to develop some type of framework to use it at scale, and something like say an AI could learn how to use the tool, and then in the hand of a bad actor somebody could figure out this stuff and then be basically able to use people or prompt people on command to do all kinds of bad things.
No, it's not going to happen. Because remember, I told you, people at the bottom of the scale don't get it. They're dopey. They don't understand. And because they don't understand, they're going to say, this is gobbledygook and throw it away. You know, uh, what might actually happen is you could actually have something that has happened in the past, which is that people in power want to get rid of this book.
Yeah, that's another. That was something I was gonna ask after this, but yeah. So there's also a version this of this where I guess if somebody that's in power realizes that this book could actually enlighten too many people and therefore make them less susceptible to manipulation or just sheer disinformation, that could be a problem. I don't know. Have you had any type of issues or feedback where your book is being pushed back against at this point, or no?
Not that I know of, but
Yeah,
but you have to realize that the scenario that you just articulated has been going on for 6,000 years. Okay, people in power have been suppressing information to not in order to hold on to power. I mean, remember I said Bill Clinton was impeached because of perjury and suborning perjury. Suborning perjury means you tell somebody else to lie under oath. Okay? He was suppressing the truth. He didn't want it to get out. The government does this 7 days a week.
24
They
hours.
have been they have been lying to us about UFOs for 80 years.
Yeah.
And they're
And,
still
and
lying, and tomorrow they're going to still be lying. Now, honestly, if you go around, I live in Arizona, okay?
yeah,
And I know a lot of people. It's common knowledge in Arizona that the last election was fraudulent. It's
really?
also, yes, I talk to people, oh, yeah, I know that. Everybody knows. Everybody on both sides knows. It's not just that the Republicans know, the Democrats know, the Independents,
Is
everybody knows.
this
Look,
the first
here's
time
what
this
happened.
happened?
Here's what happened. Common knowledge. The cartels who come across the border whenever they want and have a presence in the state, they bribed the election officials and the judges to take over the state. So Kerry Lake was 11 points ahead 1 week before the election and loses. How does that happen? That's impossible. It's fraudulent because we had the most dysfunctional, chaotic election in the history of Arizona. It went on for weeks.
What election are you referring to? Congressional, presidential,
2020.
2020 presidential election.
No, remember it's 2022. I it was one, let's see. Yeah, 2022 when Kerry Lake ran. So look,
That's the election
Kerry
for
Lake
office of
said
governor.
straight out, on the first day that I'm governor, I will put the National Guard on the southern border of Arizona, and there will be no illegal crossings. They had to get rid of her. So they did. They suppressed the truth. And so the person who's now governor didn't even debate Kerry Lake. You know, normally you have governors to have a debate, right? Sometimes
Hmm.
they have multiple debates. There
Yeah,
was no
yeah, yeah.
debate. You know why she didn't debate? Because she knew the fix was in. So
Wow.
that's going on all the time. Okay,
That,
so there are millions of children every year who just disappear. Millions. Where do they go? You mean nobody knows? You know that the uh, Department of Homeland Security, who's supposed to guard our border,
mhm.
admits there are 85,000 children that are missing. Where do they go? They're slaves, those
Where?
kids. They're slaves. They belong to people.
In this same country?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So what you're describing has been going on all along, and it's still going on.
That is insane. That in this day and age, that is insane. It is so far from what you would think is possible that it almost melts your brain to think that it's even possible.
That's because the government owns the media, and the media are professional liars who conceal the truth.
Which is part of the reason I decided to because at some point I got to the point where almost everything, and I was speaking to this guy the other day. I forgot what his name is. He talks about outrage politics where people just basically, and there is very much intention behind this, like setting pitting Americans against each other, and you're so caught up
That's
in
right.
this stupid fight and argument that you lose sight of what actually matters.
That's right. That's right. You know all these riots that are going on campuses now?
Yeah.
Okay. A tremendous proportion of those people have nothing to do with those colleges. They're not students. They're adults. They're paid to go in there and foment trouble. Somebody is paying them. Okay. They don't even belong on the campus. Okay. The whole thing is a put up job. Now, some students, well, yeah, there's a few dopey students who are ignorant and will just troublemakers. Okay. But there's 40-year-old people in there. So the cops come in, they arrest this guy. There's a 40-year-old guy. What are you doing on the campus? Do you go to the school? No. Are you a teacher? No.
So
Okay.
what are you doing there?
Hmm?
So what is? Oh my goodness.
It's intentional. Okay. So the government lies to you all the time. Okay. And it's not just the United States government.
And you
All the
know,
governments lie.
for those of us that came here when I moved, I came here as a student. When I moved here, one of the things that I like because when I was about to leave Cameroon, right? So I had two scholarships. I had a scholarship to go to Italy, and I had a partial scholarships to come do my master's at UCO. And I picked the US. Part of the reason I picked the US is because in my young and naive mind at the time, I think I was 23 or so. I was as naive as I was still smart enough to realize that at the end of the day, America had more opportunities than Italy just because of how their political and economic system was set up. I just felt as though if I was opportune to come here, once I am out of school, I'll have better opportunities to be able to get a better life for myself. And I always pride myself around saying that the way the American government is run is nothing like the government from my country, Cameroon. What I'm seeing today looks like deja vu to me because I know what it means when elected representatives do not care about the people. They don't do anything about the people. They just
Right.
care about personal interest and the businesses. That is what I came from. And I'm seeing a trend here where that's where these folks are headed.
That's
Everybody's
right.
worried about Ukraine, they're worried about Israel, they're worried about everybody else. But the people here, and I tell myself, if this was Cameroon and this was my country, I would never stand up. I'll never pick immigrants above people from my own country.
Right.
I'll care about somebody else border that's halfway
Right.
across the world. Like we are here, we are paying taxes here. You're more worried about everything else but us. How does that make sense? And I see this happening, and it doesn't. I don't know, but Americans don't seem to realize that things are trending in the wrong direction at this
That's
point.
right. Things have been trending in the wrong direction since they killed Jack Kennedy in 1963. Okay. That was a coup. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the vice president, was behind that. He killed his boss. He didn't pull the trigger himself. Bigwigs don't do that. They have hitmen. The hitman was a guy named Jimmy Files, who was a United States Army marksman. He fired the Mercury round into John Kennedy's right temple that blew off the back of his skull, and he confessed to it on video, which I watched. Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. They had to have somebody to blame it on, and he said that. He said to a reporter, "I'm a patsy." So then they had him killed by a guy who was a mafia associate who was dying of cancer. Jack Ruby. His real name is Jack Rubenstein. He was from the Chicago mob. Now he's in Texas. They say, "Jack, we want you to do a little job for us." Jack's dying of cancer. He says, "Okay, I'll do it." So he went in and killed Oswald to shut the whole thing up. Meanwhile, the CIA was behind it, and the FBI covered it up. So they have Oswald's body in the morgue, and the FBI, two FBI agents go in there with the rifle, and they take the dead body and put it on the gun to get Oswald's fingerprints on the rifle.
That's you're
So
creating
the United States government was overthrown on November 22nd, 1963, and it has been spiraling down ever since. So now it's gotten to the point where if Congress says to the Department of Justice, "We need certain records," they just ignore them. We're not giving you anything.
Really?
Yes. I guess you don't watch the news very much.
You're right. I don't for a very good reason. I stay away from it because I became aware of how acutely polarizing the news is, and I tend to, and I actually do listen to people from both sides, but I actually pick characters that I assess as being rational, not necessarily as being correct. Like I'll listen to say somebody on the left that I would say I listen to. There's this Destiny character that I listen to, and somebody on the right is like Ben Shapiro, and I listen to like I like listening, especially if your content format is long. I don't like news baiting. I don't like clickbaiting. I don't like the short titles that are just outrageous. I like to get the full story plus the content. So I truly understand what happened. Because everybody's always going to tell the story from their side. I get it. Everybody does that, but I do want a decent, body of data to be able to say, okay, I've
Right.
listened to this guy and I've listened to it, and this is what I actually think is happening.
Right.
Versus boxing myself in an echo chamber and then just feeding one side and then just going crazy. So that's what tends to happen on both sides. If you're just locked up with the Fox or with the MSM, you're gonna go crazy one way or another.
Well, if you're bothered by that stuff, yes. But
Yeah,
we got into this because you asked me about, uh, did somebody figure this out before? Okay.
yeah.
Now look, Oswald Spengler wrote a book about 100 years ago where he explained very coherently that empires have a life cycle, that every empire has a spring, a summer, a fall, and a winter. And he went through the four main empires and showed exactly with specificity how that was true. How many people know that? I mentioned Oswald Spengler. They say, who? I
I've
mean,
read Dahlia's book around the same subject, but I didn't know about the Oswald character you just.
Oswald Spengler has a whole thesis, which is very carefully laid out in his book. People didn't know that. Look, Jesus of Nazareth taught us how to behave 2,000 years ago. How many people learned from him how to behave? Very few, including most of the people who call themselves Christians.
There, yeah.
I don't want to single out Christians because there's plenty of blame to go around, but I was raised a Christian and I know a lot of Christians, and I see Christians do things that are completely the opposite of what Jesus said. Completely.
I agree. I was raised Catholic too. My
Yeah.
family is Catholic, yeah. So I get it. That is true.
Including priests and clergy. I've known many priests. I had close personal relationships with many priests. Okay.
Same here.
And some of these guys are very nice people, and some of them are not. So obviously they didn't learn. So the general story of mankind is we have all kinds of brilliant people like Plato and Aristotle and Shakespeare and Spengler, who taught all kinds of brilliant insights. Okay. And most of the people don't know anything about it. They don't know a thing about it. And those people can easily be manipulated because if you tell them something, they have no factual basis to refute it.
To refute it, yeah, they don't know how to push back. Which kind of explains the reason why we have such polarization. Because in a way, it's a failure of our educational system. Because instead of teaching kids how to think through problems, you just teach them an ideology. You just tell them what they're supposed to accept as correct or as the truth, and then that becomes their framework. Everything that they see has
That's
to
right.
go through this filter of is us versus them, poor versus rich, weak versus poor, oppressed versus
Right.
oppressed, oppressor versus oppressed. And the problem with this ideology is that it's not, it can't function because reality is dynamic. The ideology is just
Right.
a square. And sometimes, like you were talking about this, these riots on campuses, the truth about October 7th is that if you can empathize with the people of Palestine, but at the same time also empathize with the victims of
Right.
October 7th. And people on campus are basically dismissing everything that was done on October 7th and they just putting it under the umbrella of resistance. Yeah, you can even believe it was resistance, but you can also believe that what they did was wrong, like raping women and sexual mutilation
Right.
and and cutting people's heads off and you can't just operate in the world based on your ideology, which is why I value the truth so much. Which is the thing I love about your book and your framework is that it allows people to get to the truth. But my only problem is some people, even when they get to the truth, they don't even like it and they just dismiss it because the truth doesn't align with that same ideology that they already
Right.
have. And that is the real problem. Like you have to be able to change your mind if you find something compelling. You can believe A all
That's
your
right.
life. If you realize, oh wait, this guy has data that tells me this is actually wrong. You should have no choice but to change your mind because you can't decide what is true. The truth is self-evident.
Right. But you have to realize that most of the trouble on earth is caused by people who are at or near the bottom of many of these scales. That is who they
Yeah.
are. Okay. Joseph Stalin was at level 6 on the scale of basic purposes. So it's not as bad as Hitler, but it's still really bad. I mean, he killed millions of people. So who do you think does these things? Who do you think are terrorists and torturers? They're people at or near the bottom of the scales. That's who those people are.
I guess
That's why
one
I say this book is not going to help those people. They don't want to hear about it.
Okay, let me ask you something. What do you think explains or what is the rationale for why somebody, and this kind of goes again to the point that I made earlier, like just based on popular culture we like to think that people are generally just good, and then evil doesn't come out of people but comes out of the situations people deal with. What do you think? What is the rationale for why you feel like 50%, about 50% of the people are at the bottom of these scales? Is that nurture? Is that nature? Is it something else or is it a mixture?
From the viewpoint of Septemics, it does not matter. The person is at that level or he's not at that level. Just like, did you murder your wife or did you not murder your wife? If you murdered your wife, then you need to be prosecuted for that. If you didn't, then no. Okay? I mean,
And
it's
the
it's
question as
by
to why you did is irrelevant. We don't know why. We just know you did. We just
we
know
don't
you.
have to we don't have to know why. like I said, if you invited me to see the flowers in your garden, right, and I could specify what they are, I don't know why you planted tulips or planted roses. I don't know why you didn't plant violets. Doesn't matter. The garden is what it is, and I see it. And so Septemics is a descriptive science like botany or astronomy or zoology. The stars are there, okay? And we have people who study them, and they're called astronomers, okay?
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I think I get what you mean, but I guess my question is more around, it's like you could understand, how the solar system, right? You could understand that you have the nine planets, you have the sun, and they're going in this direction, and Venus is going the other one. Like you can describe it using Newtonian physics, but the question as to why is that way is almost irrelevant, because whether or not you understand why doesn't really make much of a difference. You actually have to understand the how to be able to operate in that environment, right?
Well,
I think
let me make a distinction here. The purpose of science is to determine the facts,
yes.
right? So science determines that that hydrogen has one electron. Okay, that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference between engineers and scientists are the product of an engineer is a thing that works. Okay, the product of a scientist is a theory. So we have the great genius Einstein. He gave us the theory of relativity. That is his product. Okay, but engineers are not like that. Engineers have to get results. And that is what I did here. I put this thing together. I had a lifetime of research and then development of it, putting it together, and it is factually correct. So, and let me tell you this very specifically. Each one of these 35 scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet. Okay.
Mm,
So when you look at
I
it,
like spreadsheet. Yes.
you see this body of data. Now, each one of those tables is comparable to the periodic table of elements. When you look at the periodic table, it's very clear. Everything is aligned properly,
Mm-hmm.
horizontally and vertically. It makes perfect sense. And the more you understand chemistry, the more sense it makes to you. Now, before Mendeleev invented the periodic table, there was chemistry, but he revolutionized it. He made it easier to teach, easier to learn, easier to understand because of the periodic table, because that's like the backbone of physical science, which everybody in the world is using now. Okay. Now, why didn't somebody dream it up before Mendeleev? We don't know that. How can we know that? But he did. Okay. We don't know why nobody figured out the alternating current motor before Nikola Tesla, but he did. So now we have it. And that is the story with Septemics. Okay. These scales were there. And each one of them, see, the periodic table was true before Earth existed. And it will still be true after Earth no longer exists. It is natural law. These 35 tables,
What
each
would be
one of them
the third
is
thing?
a periodic table for the corresponding subject. I read you the 35 subjects. So each of those subjects has a periodic table that explains the whole thing. So it's very much like, you take a prism and you shine white light and it separates it into a spectrum,
Yeah.
right? Roy G. Biv.
Mm-hmm.
So that is essentially what I did. So I took something like, let's say, personal influence. Okay, there's a thing called I separated into 7 rays.
Okay.
Or choice, right? Choice is an important subject for humans, right? I separated into 7 rays. Or basic purposes. Person has a basic. I separated into 7 rays. So I just observed these 7 rays and wrote them down. Now I have to tell you, the most time-consuming aspect of writing this book was expressing it in a way that would make sense to the average reader. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching people use this for 28 years.
Wow. That's that's very that's a lot, and that gives me some homework to do. Need to go back and actually take the time to, because I can see how this is gonna. I can already tell because as you're talking about this whole thing, I'm thinking about myself and I'm trying to. I've already thought about two, three different like skills that
Mhm.
I really need to look into because I already recognize certain things about myself with respect to those skills, and
Right,
I'm excited. I'm gonna be getting, hopefully, I don't know how long it's gonna take, but I'm gonna be getting that book, and I'll take the time to explore it myself.
right.
So I have
So
a, yeah, go ahead.
I, I am, I was born an engineer. Okay. So when they took aptitude tests of me, the three of the four top things were three different types of engineering. I was already in engineering school. Okay. I was accepted when I was 16. So,
Oh.
uh,
So,
what
so
is an
what kind of
engineer? An
so by
engineer,
the way, what do you specialize in? What engineering line of, you know, what kind of engineer were you fundamentally? Because I for one, I was, well, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, even though I work in IT. So what's the nature of your engineering background, so to speak?
well, really, probably mechanical more than anything else. But, mechanical always leads into
Yeah,
electrical.
it's like the mother of all engineering,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, so
But
yeah.
the point is that as an engineer, I take what I know and I use that to get results.
Yeah, to
That is
build.
what I that is what I did with my clients. Okay. I knew certain things and I would take the data that I got from him and I would use that aided by biofeedback to get to what was going on with him. So the guy would come into me and saying, I can't get along with my wife. This is terrible. I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay. So we take it up in the session. And 15 minutes into the session, he says, I just realized my wife is just like my mother.
Oh God.
No wonder we're having all this trouble. All this goes back to my mother. That's why I married my wife, because she's like my mother. So you see, then the guy says, all right, now I understand this. I say, great. And we go on to something else. So all of that, I just wrote down what I saw. And after a while, I came to realize that I had uncovered this body of data. Okay. It's just like the three laws of motion. The three laws of motion were true before Earth existed, and they will still be true after Earth no longer exists. It's just that Newton came along. He looked at it a certain way. There's a famous story about seeing the apple fall from the tree and realizing that that was the same force that was keeping the moon going around the Earth. And so from that, he was able to work out the three laws of motion. So that's, kind of, I had a similar thing that happened to me where I took this engineering framework and I used it on human phenomena and I got results. And as I said, the results verified my hypotheses. Let's say if you have a hypothesis and you test it and it doesn't work out, well, your hypothesis is wrong.
Right.
Period. Okay. So I had this thing and I used it and I used it and I used it and I saw, huh, this thing works. So I'm going to write this down so that people like you can get the book and read it and figure out.
And I'm thankful that you did that, because
Yeah.
that's very, that is a, that speaks to the kind of person you are. That speaks to what you care about, and I'm thankful that there's people in the world like you that will be not only, have the acumen to figure this out, but willing to share it and have people get access to it. Because a lot of times, people are trying to maximize their own personal gain in life, and in some ways, and that is always true. It's just that the nature of what that gain is sometimes always tend to be money, but it sounds more as though seeing the world, making the world better, seems to be more of what the outcome is going to be if people use this as skill. I can
Right,
see relationships are gonna heal.
right,
People are gonna be able to figure each other out in a family setting, in relationships, professionally, within the community.
right.
I can see a lot of value um coming out of this, and I can appreciate that. So one of the things that we do on this show is I have a question that my
Hmm.
wife has provided for me to ask all my guests, and I have a series of questions that I usually like to ask my guests before we uh we separate. So I have the first question I'm going to ask you is from my wife, right?
Okay.
And this the question goes like this: What would you tell the younger you if you could time travel back in the past and meet yourself 30 years ago? What would you tell yourself and why?
Well, I've been asked that question before, and the problem that I have with this question is that I have changed so much in my life
Yeah,
that the person that that I was in high school is not even relevant to who I am now. It's I'm a completely different person,
right.
and that's because I've been meditating for 40 years, and because I've been studying my whole life. But I might say someday you're going to figure out a system that will really help people to lead better lives and to succeed faster and easier. So pursue that.
Okay. That's beautiful. That's beautiful to know. And so, in your view, then what, and this is a follow-up question from that first question, what makes us human? When you think about the human condition, yourself and every other human man, woman, child in the world, what do you think it is about us that makes us human as compared to be it aliens or monkeys or any other group of
Well,
really?
I could answer that many different ways depending on what what strata you want to approach. I mean, there's genetic information, there's cultural information, there's many different aspects of this. But the way I think I'd like to answer it is that man is fundamentally a spiritual being. You are a spirit, and that spirit is immortal. So that spirit is really outside of the physical universe. And that's the main thing that you really need to understand. You're talking to a spiritual being, and once you know that you're a spiritual being, death is no big deal. I mean, my body is wearing out like everybody else's body, and in a few years it's going to stop working, and that's fine because I am not my body, and neither are you.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So yeah, just like so your body is more like an avatar of some sense,
It's
and
it's a
then
vehicle,
yeah, the real you is more so you exist outside of your body and outside of this physical reality that
right?
you're existing.
Right.
Yeah,
And if you study all the great religions, they all have that common theme
that
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 you're you're a spiritual being, and when the body dies, you don't die. You go to something else. There's
yeah, you transition
a
into
lot of disagreement about what the something else is,
yeah.
but from the point of view of dealing with humans, that's what I look at. This is a spiritual being thing, and you have to realize once you get that, it changes how you are. For example, I could not possibly be a racist because there's no such thing as a black spirit or a white spirit.
Light spirit. True. That is
Spirits are just
wow.
spirits,
That's a very beautiful way to put it. That is true. That is true.
you know. And so I deal with people of all ages, of all genders and races and everything else. To me, it's a spiritual being. I'm contacting that spiritual being in a meaningful way,
Yeah.
even if it's a little kid. I mean, I have students that are kids, You know, it's all right. He hasn't been in this body too long, but it's still a spiritual being, and I can deal with him really the same way that I deal with you. You know, the person wants to be respected. He wants me to pay attention to him. He wants to say what he believes, you know, very basic things. And when you get into that, that changes the whole framework of how you live.
Wow. And so this one is one of my favorite questions, but I think I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What is your philosophy of life and why do you believe it?
Well, as regards people, I would say my philosophy of life is that every person is unique. Uh,
Okay.
and so the analogy that I would use is this: rabbits are really good at running. They can't swim very well and they can't fly. So you got a rabbit, let them run. Fish can't walk, can't fly, but they can
No.
swim really well, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a bird, birds can't walk very well,
We could
and
fly.
they can't swim very well, but boy, can they fly,
Yeah.
right? So that's the way people are. So I find the good in the person, and that's the way I deal with it.
Okay.
So,
Mm.
like if I bump into a guy and we both root for the same baseball team, well, that's what we talk about. You see, we're on the same wavelength there. Or we're both Jimi Hendrix fans. We talk about Jimi Hendrix or whatever it is. You know, you find the good in the person and you utilize that. You vibrate with that person, you know, and the other things you push aside, you
Okay.
know. So it's like it doesn't matter to me what religion you come from, what race you're in, what political party. You're a spiritual being, and I'm a spiritual being, and that's how I'm going to relate to you. Now, of course, there are people who are crazy,
Yes.
terrorists, okay, uh, war criminals, professional. These are sick people, okay. So those people, I just sort of stay out of the line of fire, you know. So I met some mafia people when I was in New York because they used to control New York in my youth. Now that has changed because Rudy Giuliani, before he became mayor, broke up the mafia and he sent hundreds of them to prison, changed the whole thing. But I've met these people, okay? Scary people. But not all of them are scary. Some of them are like normal people. So again, you can't make that generalization. Well, since he's in the mafia, he's evil. It's not true. There are people in the mafia who are not evil. Are they committing crimes? Yes. And should they be prosecuted for them? Yes. But that doesn't mean they're evil people. You know,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, Carlo Gambino. Carlo Gambino was really a normal guy. It's just that was his business.
Yeah. And I totally get that. And depending, so people sometimes find themselves in a career field. It's almost like, if you think about it, our presidents or our military leaders, most of them are more than likely rational, level-headed, but in their line of duty, they make decisions that have people killed or people get hurt.
That's right.
That's the nature of their business. But then they themselves, not like they are psychos walking around just trying to kill people. You just
Right.
have to actions that tend to have certain type of consequences, not out of malice. It's just a line of business, and it might suck for you. If you're on the other end of that bullet. Yeah, it sucks for you, but you're probably on the other end of that bullet because you became a target for a very good reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, as my last guest, so every guest that I have on the show actually ends up leaving a question for the next guest, and the guest I had before you actually left a question for you, and the question is actually very interesting. Now I'm looking at the question, I'm like, that's a very good question for you. So the question is, why can't we just get along as humans? That's the question the previous guest left for you. What do you think is the reason? Why can't we get along?
Well, I really have two different answers for that.
Okay.
One is that uh, most people do not have a sense of oneself as a spiritual being.
Okay. Yeah.
And because of that, they don't have a sense of the other person as a spiritual being, which is why you get this identity politics. You know,
Yeah.
like Biden famously said, "Well, if you didn't vote for me, you're not black."
That that
That's
that was such I'm just gonna
idiocy.
turn to the
It's
road that was
idiocy.
so ignorant for him to say, but carry on.
Right, right. So, so uh, now the other thing is, as far as why people have trouble getting along, they don't have Septemics.
I figured that's what you're probably gonna say. You don't have
Get
to.
get
Yeah.
the book and read it and use it, and your life will go better. Because let me
Mhm.
tell you in closing, when I was a young man or a boy, depending on what age you want to talk about, this data didn't exist. I hadn't invented it yet, right? So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. And I got involved with people I never should have been involved with because I didn't know what I was looking at. Now, for me, that does not happen, cannot happen, will not happen.
Okay.
I know what I'm looking at. So if somebody comes on the scene and is running for office, I analyze that person, okay? And I know what I'm looking at. And then
And
I
that
can
is what
decide.
drives your decision as to whether I'm voting for person A versus person B. You're looking at the person at the personality level, so to speak, right? You're looking at them much more deeply than just what they say or what people would like you to believe. You're really
Right.
objectively analyzing the person
That's right.
outside of everything else. Just
That's
who
right.
are you?
That's right. That is what this is for: analysis, prediction, and management of human affairs. You analyze a person, uh, or you analyze a group, even in some cases, like the KKK or the Nazis or the Boy Scouts. They're groups. You can analyze them.
So that's a better predictor of what they're going to do if they get elected as compared to anything else that you could say about that person. Their personality trait based on this Septemic analysis would be
Yes,
a much better predictor of how they're going to behave in the future
right,
versus yeah.
right. So, for example, when I look at Abraham Lincoln, somebody who I studied at great length, he is at level 2 on the scale of basic purposes. His basic, he is what I call a leader, okay? And the basic purpose of the leader is conquest. Well, he was determined to conquer the Confederacy. He had very little help with that. His generals wouldn't fight for him. His cabinet wouldn't help him. He had a lot of trouble, but he was determined to conquer them, and he did. Okay, he was a leader, level 2. So when I look at Lincoln as a leader, I understand him very well. Or Alexander Hamilton is another person who was a leader. If you look at his life, the choices he made, how he behaved, what he did, he was at level 2. His basic purpose was to conquer. In his case, it was to conquer the British. He left Columbia University, what's now called Columbia University, and joined the militia to fight the British. Okay? That's what you get from a leader, as opposed to Jefferson. Jefferson was not a leader. Jefferson was at level 3, a winner. Boy, did he win. He won and he won and he won. But he was not somebody who was out for conquering people. You see? You can say, well, isn't conquest a bad thing? Well, that's a question of whose ox is being gored.
Right.
I mean, I'm glad that Lincoln conquered the Confederacy. I'm glad that Winston Churchill, another leader, conquered the Nazis. That's a good conquest. Have there
Mm-hmm.
been bad conquests? Of course.
Genghis Khan is a good one.
Right. So when you get this, it's very specific and really helps you in your life.
I can see
So,
that.
so let's say a guy's going out with a woman, right, for 2 years. They're talking about getting married. Wouldn't it be smart for him to know what her motive is? Why does this woman want to marry me? So you look at the scale of motivation. Now, maybe he figures out it's level 1, which is love. She's motivated by love. That's a good reason to marry somebody. But maybe he figures out that she really wants to marry him because He drives a Maserati. He has a 60-foot yacht. He flies his own Learjet. He lives in a $10 million condo, and he has $20 million in the bank. That's a different motivation. That's level 4, money. And he might say, well, now that I think of it, this woman is a gold digger. I don't want to marry a gold digger. I want to marry somebody who loves me. And he breaks up with her. Now, you're going to think he's going to be bummed out by that. No, he's not going to. He's going to be relieved. Oh, thank God I figured this out
He made
now.
a difficult decision, but it's based on something that is so true that he knows that.
Yes. Yes. And look, you could have another guy who doesn't think that way. You have a lot of old, rich, ugly guys married to beautiful young women. Well, how does that work? So you the 23-year-old beauty queen, right? She marries this 60-year-old guy, right? She gets a diamond ring, a pearl necklace, a mink coat, a Corvette, and a credit card. So she's happy.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't care. He's got plenty of money. He gets a 23-year-old beauty queen for a wife. So he's happy. That's how that works. So he's happy to marry a gold digger. So if she comes to him and says, I feel like going to Paris for Christmas. He says, okay, here's 10 grand. Have a good time.
Wow.
He doesn't care. See? So I'm not saying, none of this is judgmental. It's just
get into
how
the
do you
thing.
fit into the situation?
Yeah.
If you're hiring a guy, if you own a automobile dealership, right? And you're looking for a salesman, you want somebody who's money motivated, right? You talk to this guy, right? You don't want somebody who's idealistic, who wants to help the world.
That's probably why I can't be a good salesman, because I'm not. I mean, I'm motivated by money, but I'm not that crazy about it. I'm more of an idealistic type minded person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you find out that this guy is motivated by money. You talk to him and he tells you things like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be rich someday. I want to make a lot. Great. You're hired. Get out there and sell cars. That's what you want. You see? But that might not be what you want in the person you marry.
There you go.
See? So that's how you use this. It's very practical. It's very specific. Has nothing to do with judging anybody. It's just seeing what's there and using it. It's like a guy who can tell the difference between real gold and fool's gold. Iron pyrites looks like gold. Yeah. And so there's plenty of people who found it and said, oh, I discovered gold. It wasn't gold, it was worthless. All right. But then you have experts who can say, this is gold. See, that guy is an expert. He's not going to be fooled by the iron pyrites. He knows when he sees gold and when he doesn't. And that's what this book is about. So it empowers you to figure out what is, from a human point of view, whom am I dealing with here? Who is this person? What is this person really about? Is this somebody who's going to stick with me? Is this somebody I can trust? Is this somebody I can tell a secret and be sure that they're not going to divulge it to anybody? All these things are built into these.
Wow.
Skills.
That is very useful. I don't know. I need to get that book, because I feel like if this blows up, they might come after. I almost feel a little bit worried, because if this seems to be a very powerful methodology that you can use to do a lot of good, but you could also use it to do a lot of bad stuff. There's always bad actors. I think everybody needs to get their copy ASAP.
But as I said, the people who are at or near the bottom of the scale are not going to read this book.
They don't even want to look at it. Yeah, you said
right. That. You think you're going to sell this book to the mafia or the Russian mob?
Probably not.
or Hamas, terrorists. They're not going to be interested in this book.
Probably not.
It's got to be somebody. It's got to be somebody who's insightful enough to look at himself and see the truth of himself and see where he fits and see the truth of his wife or his mother or his daughter or his boss. And then he knows what he's dealing with. And then, of course, you can move up to the next level.
Up to the
So
next
then
level.
you're an improved person.
Right. So, what question would you want me to ask the next guest? It doesn't really matter what the question is or what is it about. Any off the top of your head,
The
what
question I would want you to ask him is, do you know what septemics is?
do you know what Septemics is? Okay. You know what Septemics is. Okay. I will ask this question to my next guest. I have no idea what he's going to say, but we'll see. We'll find out. But that's
Well, it's a yes or no question.
yes or no question,
You're either
right?
going to say yes or no.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Wow, this is a big shocker. You've given me a lot to think about. It sounds, it almost sounds so obvious, and I'm shocked as to why I've never heard about it and why it seems so new. But it seems so, duh. This makes perfect sense. Why has nobody ever talked about it? Or
As I said, it's the same thing with
yeah,
Newton's three
yeah,
laws of motion.
exactly.
I
It seems
mean,
intuitive
for
once you
those of
break it
us,
down.
in the physics community, it's like, well, duh. It's so obvious,
Yep,
But no, he's the guy who figured it out
that's right.
400 years ago,
Yeah.
or alternating current motion. I mean, alternating current engine. We know how it works. It's very simple. It's obvious. Anybody in engineering can tell you how the AC motor works, but it came out of the mind of Nikola Tesla. Okay? So before that, it didn't exist. So that's the way we progress. That's the way humans progress.
That is true. That is so true.
Or like Spengler's thesis of empires having a life cycle. It's
Yeah,
brilliant. It's brilliant. And more important than brilliant is when you read it, it's correct. It's correct.
because
It's
it
not
is
just
true.
brilliant.
It's almost like the natural course of that
Yes,
system. That's basically how it
that's
naturally
right.
works.
That's
And you
right.
having all that information helps you get an insight. If you're within an empire, you see exactly where you are.
Right,
It's your competitive advantage as to what your next move is going to be.
right. So I
And
can,
it's
so I can tell you, the United States is now in winter.
I came to that conclusion after reading Ray Dalio's book, but I was in a little bit of denial. I wanted to think that we're more in maybe like we're just going through a little tornado storm or something, but it does seem as though we are in the winter
Yes.
of our cycle, which is
The
kind of
United
brilliant,
States,
if you ask me. Just
the
200.
United States has been going down since they killed Jack Kennedy, which was 60 years ago. And that was the fall or autumn, and now it has reached a point where it's gone into winter.
Winter.
Okay,
Wow.
and the
I guess the question is, can we
English Empire
recover?
went through the same thing.
Do you think we can recover?
Well, look, the people are not going to disappear. The land is not going to disappear. The buildings are not going to disappear. Something, like the Egyptian
Something's got to
Empire
give.
fell. Egypt is still there. The English Empire fell. England is still there. It's going to be very, very different. It's going to, So, I mean, I don't want to. I hate to leave you with bad news, but nobody is going to make America great again. Can't be done because we are in the winter.
So it's basically like a one-way street at this point where there's no coming back. It's only gonna get worse, basically. That's what you're saying.
Right now, can can it be can it be managed? Yes. Can the decline be slowed? Yes. I mean, it would be nice if
But
you
it
could just
cannot
get.
be stopped altogether.
Well, I mean, look, there's nothing in society goes in a straight line.
Yeah.
Everything is in and out and up and down and backwards and forwards and 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And so, yes, things could be done to lessen the inflation, to improve the economy, to cut down crime, all kinds of things. It doesn't mean that the United States is not in winter. It is.
Still in winter.
Now, those of us who studied Spengler, we can see this, it's crystal clear, it's obvious. It's obvious to us. And that's how Septemics is. Once you study it, it's obvious.
Once you know it, you cannot unknow it. You almost cannot unlearn it because you already know. Now you just have to deal with it as is.
And that's especially true for natural law. Once you know the Pythagorean theorem, that's it. You know it. You know, and it's so clear. It's indisputable. It's not hard to teach to anybody. And once you could be an 8-year-old kid and you learn the Pythagorean theorem, you get it, and you've got it for the rest of your life because it's natural law. And that's what Septemics is. It's natural law. Wow. And I want to just close by inviting your listeners to my website, which is septemics.com, SEPTEMICS, where you can see what many readers have said, many journalists have written, what the reviews are. You can read parts of the book itself on the website, and you can listen, if you're interested, to a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics, which explains the whole subject in 15 minutes to a new person.
Wow, that's beautiful. And is your book available in audio and hardcovers, or is it
No
just
audio? No audio. It will never be an audio book, or at least unless I die and somebody else does it against my will. But
so what's your reason? What's your rationale? Why don't you want it?
because you have to look at the tables. You look at the scale of
It could be a
basic
YouTube
purposes.
video, but not an audio book. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, it's like looking at the periodic table, right? You want to study, you look at it and you say,
Right.
oh, yeah, I see sodium is in the same line here with potassium. That explains a lot. You see, you eat potassium and then it replaces the sodium. And so you lose water from you can control your body just by knowing that one little fact. So you have to look at the periodic table, these 35 periodic tables for the corresponding subjects.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Well, Jim Marshall, I really want to say thank you. I really appreciate you taking this time because this is gonna be 2.5 hours of your life that you've graciously offered to myself and my audience. And on behalf of myself, my team, and my audience, I really want to say thank you. And hopefully we'll do a second round. And I want to say that if we do a second round, I would have read your book at that point, and I will be able to give a little bit more context and at least testify based on my own experience of
Right.
I am actually glad that I haven't read it yet because right now it's almost as if you've kind of hyped me a little bit. So now I really need to go, and I'll leave the link to your website in the description of this video.
Okay.
I really want to say thank you and appreciate you for taking the time. And no good deed goes unappreciated here. Thank you very, very much, and have a great rest of your Sunday, sir.
Namaste.
Namaste. Stay blessed. Have a good one. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. So now that we finished, I want to tell you something. You can turn off the recording.
All right.
So I have a Septemics